Chapter 195. Unexpected Surprise 5. In fact, Su Zian was somewhat angry with Madame Su. There was one point that Bai Qining had mentioned that was correct. Everything about the madam was great, except that her heart was too biased. She actually made Su Luo live in such a dilapidated courtyard for so many years. No matter how much you may not like it, she was still his Su Zian's daughter. Su Zian had never once doubted his own first wife, but now in his heart for the first time, a crack appeared in his trust towards Madame Su. Once the seed of doubt was planted, as for when it would grow roots and germinate, would depend on how the bystanders watered and fertilized it. It was also very evident that Su Luo was an expert at this line of work. She observed Su Zian's and Madame Su's interaction. Her eyes narrowed and a contemplative smile appeared in their depths. "General, we have dug something out. Quickly bring it up." Su Zian stood at the side of the hole, his eyes, revealing his deep worry, stared attentively at the bottom of the pit. This was a major event related to his face. He could not be sloppy. However, when he saw that small box made of red sandalwood and lined with brocade, a thread of misgiving flashed across his eyes. He had only heard that back then Elder Su buried gold. He had never heard of him having buried some precious stones. When Madame Su saw that brocade-lined small box, a trace of unease appeared in her eyes. This brocade small box was definitely not the one she had commanded people to bury. In the end, what odd thing was in it? In fact, a look of astonishment also flashed across Su Luo's face. It was very obvious that this matter was also outside of her expectations. Yes, after she had guessed Madame Su's intentions, she actually did bury a few things again. However, she did not use this particular brocade small box. Evidently the stuff she buried had been switched with something else. In the end, who was it that had done this? What stratagem did the opponent use? Who was supposed to be drawn in? Su Luo narrowed her eyes dangerously. Even though her heart had layers of doubt, her face remained calm and collected, as unperturbed as before. Bai Qining saw Su Luo's behavior, and an appreciative expression appeared in his black eyes. All of a sudden, Su Luo's black, ancient well-like eyes, with their unperturbed surface, shot a penetrating glance at Bai Qining. Her gaze met his head-on in midair, scaring Bai Qining into skipping a step. However, Bai Qining's manner very quickly returned. He smiled towards Su Luo with a few hey laughs. His smile held the meaning of taking credit for an achievement. Taking credit? Could it be the person that had switched in the brocade-lined small box? Was him? The corner of Su Luo's mouth was slightly upturned. She faintly smiled while shooting him a quick glance. She really wanted to see what kind of game this venerable Bai Qining was playing. The soldier respectfully offered up the small box, momentarily unsure as to who to hand it to. Normally, it should be handed over to Su Zian, as he was the master of this house. However, in theory, among the crowd of people at the scene, the most royal in position could not surpass His Highness the Crown Prince. Yet in theory, the most arrogant and publicized person perfectly described Bai Qining. The Crown Prince's indifferent eyes glimpsed at Bai Qining, both hands crossed at his back and his mouth rising into a faint sneer. Bai Qining made the exact same movement and posture as the Crown Prince. He even imitated the Crown Prince's facial expression. His actions once again infuriated the Crown Prince, making him almost flare up. Su Zian thought about it and said, "Bring it up." He received the small brocade box made of red sandalwood from the soldier's hand. Momentarily, the eyes of everyone present at the scene landed upon this small brocade box, made of red sandalwood. The small brocade box was approximately the length of two adult persons' hands, and the width was about one hand size. On the surface of the box was carved exquisite ornate artwork, with the drawing of the phoenix painted in gold. At a glance, people could tell that this box was worth a considerable amount. Could it be that inside it indeed contained precious stones? With expectant thoughts, Su Zian's hand slowly opened the sealed-up, small brocade box. When he saw the item within the box, a suspicious expression appeared on Su Zian's face. Inside there were no precious stones but a very thin book. The book was one of the most common kinds, with a blue leather cover. There was also no title on the cover. Could it be a book on secret martial arts manual? Su Zian opened the book. He only flipped through one page, before a huge change occurred on his face. Chapter 196, The Final Truth, one page after page, written in black and white, was actually. The Crown Prince saw the huge change in Su Xian's expression, and a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. He walked up a few steps and stood by Su Xian's side, leaning in sideways to look. However, Su Xian's actions were like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. He rapidly sprang back with movements that were faster than lightning. His Highness the Crown Prince was disgruntled. The paranoid Crown Princes gave a glare full of dark maliciousness and displeasure at Su Xian. An angry resentfulness appeared in his heart. This Su Xian was simply too brazen. Su Luo was also staring somewhat inquisitively at the blue leather book in Su Xian's hands. However, it was a pity that she was too far away from Su Xian's position and was unable to clearly see the words written in the book. Now, the only unperturbed person at the scene was none other than the venerable Beichen. His beautiful pair of liquid eyes burned with radiance. The corner of his eyes were slightly raised, carrying an expression that showed he had expected it, and with the appearance of watching a play. However, he seemed to dislike this play as not being wonderful enough, and one only saw him gave a meaningful glance at the black-clothed person by his side. The black-clothed man understood and nodded his head. Afterwards, his body immediately disappeared from where it stood. When his body reappeared, he was already only an arm's length away from Su Xian. The knife-like thin hands of the black-clothed person was quick as lightning, pinched straight towards Su Xian's throat. In Su Xian's mind, the image of the Crown Prince's imperial bodyguard being exterminated by the black-clothed man's 2 fingers appeared. He subconsciously and instinctively sent a palm attack towards the black-clothed man. However, the black-clothed man's move was merely an empty maneuver. His intent was not to kill Su Xian, but rather to steal the blue leather book in his hand. So just when Su Xian counterattacked, he leaned sideways and avoided it. 2 fingers like iron clamps hit Su Xian's pulse, holding him in place. Su Xian's hand immediately lost all its strength, and the fingers holding the blue leather book became powerless as the book slid down. Who knew what the black-clothed man was thinking? He single-handedly caught the blue leather book. It seemed like he had accidentally snapped the string that bound the blue leather book together. Naturally, apart from the instigator of this, Beichen and Su Luo, who had paid close attention to the black-clothed man, nobody else noticed. Quickly return it to me. Su Xian immediately became anxious. The things inside that book absolutely must not be taken away by Beichen. Otherwise, not only him, but also the entire Su manor would die without a burial site. The black-clothed man used his silence as answer. He quietly stood behind Beichen. His entire body was enveloped in the shadows, unsympathetic, as if he didn't exist. Su Xian saw that his words were ineffective against him. He turned his head and glared at Beichen with utter discontent. Venerable Beichen, that is my Su family's secret martial arts manual. The secret manual can't be passed on to others. It absolutely cannot end up in others' hands. So please, you must return this book to me. Otherwise what? Beichen had both hands crossed behind his back. With an arrogant manner of someone in a higher position, he slanted a glance at Su Xian. His expression was rather like that of a person who had made an exception for Su Xian. Otherwise, Su Xian bit down on his back molars. His ashen-colored face was unswervingly determined. He was only seen coldly shouting out, word by word. Otherwise, my Su manor will certainly hunt all of you down and kill you all in the end. Before, Beichen was so arrogant in not giving him face, and Su Xian had still endured it all. However, now because of a very small book, he would go to war. Inside this, there was something extremely fishy going on. What was it that was written in that little blue leather book that could make Su Xian so worried to such a degree? As for Su Xian's claim of the so-called secret martial arts manual, no matter what, Su Luo wouldn't believe it. Now Su Luo was somewhat curious. What was really written in that little blue leather book? When Beichen heard what he said, he started to laugh uproariously. He was laughing so hard that he almost couldn't breathe. With great difficulty, he finally restrained his laughter. Hunt down and kill in the end? Ha ha, ha, I'm so scared. Everyone could tell that Beichen Ying's words were sarcastic. Chapter 197. The Final Truth 2. Yet unexpectedly, Beichening only raised his sleeves and waved his hand, carelessly saying, Meiying, since it's already like this, you should send it back. Meiying won. The person was like his name. His figure was ghost-like, and he also made no sound, maintaining his manner as though silence was golden. One could only see the afterimage of his right hand's action. Then the blue leather book shot towards Su Zian in a parabolic arc. Everyone's anxious gaze was locked in midair on the blue leather book. Pair after pair of eyes contained complex rays of light, burning with radiance, each with their own thoughts. However, the next second, an unexpected event occurred. The string binding the blue leather book was snapped in midair, resulting in countless snow-white pieces of paper fluttering about like snowflakes, gently falling to the ground. As far as Su Jingyu's type of person was concerned, he dared not rob. But since it had already spread to the ground, if he took the opportunity to pick it up, and by chance happened to take a peek, then it shouldn't be a problem. Therefore, Su Jingyu bent down to scoop up the paper. However, before his fingers could touch the paper, he saw a stream of flame suddenly rush towards his hand. The momentum of the flame was like a rushing torrent, with nothing held back. Su Jingyu whirled his body to avoid it, and turned his body around to look back. He discovered that the person that had attacked him was not an outsider, but rather the person he respected the most, his honorable father. Father? Su Jingyu was simply in disbelief. He would never have imagined that the person that had attacked him would be Su Zian, his own biological father. Su Zian angrily roared, "Don't move! Nobody is allowed to move!" Everyone was stunned by Su Zian's berserk behavior. Without exception, they stupidly looked at him. However, the Su Zian right now seemed not to care the least bit about everyone's gaze. His mission was to make sure that not a single piece of paper remained in this world. Numerous small balls of fire condensed in Su Zian's palm and swept towards the ground. The fluttering pieces of paper on the ground were immediately transformed into light smoke and disappeared into the air. Seeing the pieces of paper being destroyed, Su Zian's complexion eased a little. He slowly relaxed and let out a soft, long breath of air. However, at this point in time, if there were no onlookers, he wanted to burn it, then no one would object. But now, on top of His Highness the Crown Prince, there was also the venerable President Beichen. Su Zian's actions were too excessive. His attempts to hide it made it even more conspicuous. Therefore, Su Zian still needed to face a series of interrogations. The Crown Prince was the first to show displeasure on his face. His complexion was hazed over with an ashen color. His pair of dark eyes unblinkingly stared at Su Zian. In his view, Su Zian had ignored this master and was too arrogant. Su Zian's entire face was full of bitterness, but he could only swallow the bitterness and stuff it in his stomach. How could he explain it? What could he use to explain? Beichening saw Su Zian and the Crown Prince being at odds, and his heart had already opened up with happiness. However, his face still had to feign anger and said, "General Su, what do you mean by this? What things cannot be seen by us? You would actually deliberately destroy it in front of the Crown Prince? In your eyes, do you still have His Majesty the Emperor? Do you still have His Highness the Crown Prince?" Su Zian's heart was suffering bitterly from anger. In regards to who was the most arrogant, if you, Beichening, resigned yourself to being second, nobody else would dare to be known as first. Now, you have reversed everything and fastened this criminal charge on Su Zian's body. Although Beichening's words were unpleasant to hear, however, it completely struck at the Crown Prince's weak spot. His malicious and sharp eyes glared at Su Zian. His complexion was like condensed austerity, so gloomy as to be terrifying. Su Zian grinded his teeth and hurriedly kneeled down. Suddenly, his brain was hit by inspiration, but his face only revealed a terrified expression. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, that thing really had rumors that would spread a cold. This old man is afraid it will dirty the Crown Prince's eyes. Therefore I hurriedly destroyed it." Humph! The Crown Prince threw his sleeves skeptically. Would Beichening let Su Zian so easily pass this test? Quite clearly he would not. 1. Meiying, literally translated as phantom or shadow. Chapter 198. The Final Truth 3. One could only see his eyes wide open. with an exaggerated incredulous expression. "General Su, how can you lie to His Highness the Crown Prince? Just now you clearly said that it was your Su Manor's secret martial arts manual. How come in a blink of an eye it transformed into a book of pornographic drawings? You shouldn't lie without even batting an eyelid." In this split second, Su Luo felt that the venerable Bei Qining was quite adorable. At least in front of Su Zian. That ability to wound was something simply no one could withstand. A book of drawings that would harm public morals was dug up in Su Luo's courtyard. Very obviously, if this was to spread out, it would harm Su Luo's womanly reputation. It would make her the laughingstock of the entire capital. Very clearly, Su Zian intended to bluff his way out. However, he completely forgot to worry about how much harm this would cause Su Luo. In his heart, perhaps only someone he could make use of and could benefit from was of interest to him. When he landed in such a predicament, would Madame Su also end up as an easily discardable chess piece? With regards to this point, Su Luo had expectant thoughts. Speaking of Su Zian, this sentence spoken by Bei Qining was obviously a slap to Su Zian's face. Moreover, it was said in front of everyone, as he had ruthlessly slapped him with those words. Su Zian's expression momentarily hazed over. His pair of penetrating eyes ignited into two flames. He glared coldly and darkly at Bei Qining. Now he was completely certain. Bei Qining definitely came to Su Manor to pick a quarrel. Seeing the Crown Prince show displeasure, Su Zian hurriedly stated, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, that really was a book with drawings that could damage a person's decency. If it was truly a secret martial arts manual, how could I be willing to burn it? The reason why I was so deeply worried was because if this was spread out, then it would be detrimental to my family's luoer." Once these words were spoken, around more than half of the people present believed it, including the Crown Prince, because this justification was quite sufficient and also necessary. A father, in order to protect his own daughter's womanly reputation, had become so deeply worried that he had anxiously set all traces on fire. It really was a very dignified justification. A faint mocking sneer appeared at the corner of Su Luo's mouth. Su Zian was truly not stupid. He could pull this out at the most critical moment. It was sufficient to illustrate his viciousness, mercilessness, and shrewd reaction. However, obviously he underestimated the strength of a certain young lady that he just framed. He still had not had a chance to directly experience Miss Su's sinister cunningness. Only, Su Luo intended to allow him to carefully observe it this time. Everyone's identical gaze concentrated upon Su Luo's. Those gazes contained disdain, derision, scorn, and so on, with all kinds of complex overtones. The Crown Prince used an even more deep gaze full of meaning to make fun of Su Luo, while seizing her up and down. That sort of gaze made Su Luo very uncomfortable. But Su Luo only faintly smiled. She looked at her cheap old man with a smile that was not quite a smile. Suddenly, an extra thin piece of paper actually appeared in her hand. On the paper was something written out in black and white. However, they were too far away, so everyone could not see it very clearly. Su Luo leisurely waved that piece of paper around with a careless smile on the corner of her mouth. "Honorable Father, that thing that you just said had morally corrupt drawings, was referring to the stuff on this piece of paper, right?" Boom! Su Zian felt the blood from the sole of his feet rush up to his forehead in a split second. For a short period of time, his mind became stupefied. Seeing Su Luo's mocking and derisive manner, Su Zian's entire body immediately became stiff. How could there be one more page? When did this loathsome girl pick it up? Such a dramatic development unexpectedly appearing caught everyone unprepared. Just now, almost all the sheets of paper were destroyed by Su Zian instantly. Consequently, everyone had no choice but to listen to his nonsense. Chapter 199. The Final Truth 4. However, now, there was still one piece of paper left in Su Luo's hands. Then there was still another opportunity to find out the truth, right? In fact, Su Luo's execution of her plan had been beautifully done. She merely had to wave that piece of paper in her hand to be able to wash clean the dirty water that Su Zian had spilled onto her. It was because she dared to brazenly take it out in front of everyone. This demonstrated that the stuff was not the nonsense of immoral things that Su Zian had said. After all, if it was true, then the first person who would want to destroy that paper the most would not be Su Zian, but Su Luo herself. Su Zian glared at Su Luo. His appearance was imposing, cold and solemn. Luo, or be obedient. Quickly destroy that stuff. Su Luo faintly smiled and raised her eyebrows. Daddy, why are you so anxious? Your daughter is really curious. Was it this stuff that will harm public morals? In the end, what is it? Saying this, Su Luo's eyes swept around her surrounding once. Then, she looked at Su Zian again and softly said, seeing everyone's expression, it seems as if everyone is very curious. Daddy, how about we let everyone have a look at it and let them judge? What do you think? These remarks infuriated Su Zian until he almost fell down. Was this not an unfilial and rebellious daughter? It truly infuriated him to death. Su Zian was so angry that he almost directly went up to choke Su Luo to death. However, in reality, he was not allowed to do something like this. Madame Su and Su Zian had been married for so many years that she could clearly understood his thinking. With a smile, she used a soft-spoken voice to say to Su Luo, Luoer, don't be mad at your father. How could there be enmity between a father and a daughter from before? Besides, what your father did is for your own good, isn't it so? While Madame Su was speaking, she also tried to get closer to Su Luo. Now everyone who was at the scene had their gaze concentrated on Madame Su and Su Luo. Almost no one saw Su Zian surreptitiously give a meaningful look at Captain Zhao. Captain Zhao understood at once. He was hidden behind Su Luo. He silently tried to get closer to Su Luo. 3 steps, 2 steps, 1 step. Just when his hands reached out to snatch away the paper from Su Luo's hand, suddenly a black shadow gave rise to an eerie and cold wind. The wind was like the edge of a blade, following along Captain Zhao's hand and slicing towards the wrist. In a flash, Captain Zhao's wrist was cut from his arm. Because of the acute pain, Captain Zhao's body dropped to the floor. He painfully cradled his arm, which continued to spurt out blood. His facial features were twisted hideously due to pain. Blood gushed out onto the ground. Drops of various sizes and shapes could be seen. The air was filled with the thick smell of blood. Su Luo's fine eyebrows wrinkled slightly. Her gaze frankly looked at Su Zian. The sneer at the corner of her mouth was very obvious. Honorable father, you wouldn't kill your daughter to silence her because of this little piece of paper, right? Su Zian was so furious that his complexion became ashen, and he angrily rebuked. What rubbish talk! Anyway, quickly shut up. Beichening only rubbed his hands and smiled. General Su, this play really is extremely fascinating. This lord is very interested in watching it. Saying this, he walked towards Su Luo step by step. He raised an eyebrow and smiled at her. The 4th Miss Su, would it be convenient for you to let me see that piece of paper? I am very curious about it. Su Luo looked indifferent. Her gaze shot to Su Zian. Seeing his black face and him repeatedly shaking his head with eyes like a sharp sword, sharp enough to pierce through her heart. If the expression in someone's eyes could kill, then Su Luo's body would by now have been sliced into many pieces. Meeting that pair of sharp and hawk-like eyes, the corner of Su Luo's mouth lifted slightly when answering Beichening. The venerable Beichen wants to see, however. It seems as if my honorable father is not willing. Besides, the brocade box was clearly placed there by you, Beichening. You clearly knew what was inside better than anyone else. Chapter 200. The Final Truth 5. Beichening's gift for acting was something he was born with. He glanced at that piece of paper in Su Luo's hand. With only a quick glance, his brows knotted tightly. Then he looked at Su Zian with a complicated expression. That kind of serious stare with an incredulous expression simply frightened Su Zian until he was scared witless. His heart continuously jumped with ba-thump sounds. Furthermore, with Beichening's appearance of desiring to speak and his hesitation that showed he was about to say something, but was unsure of how to do it, it practically resembled a claw that scratched at Su Zian's secure body, making it itch everywhere. The corner of Su Luo's mouth stretched back and forth. He simply made her speechless. Alas, how could she say it? In fact, Su Zian's actions just now were really fast. When he was destroying the evidence, it was so fast that nobody had enough time to react. Moreover, She was far from the book, so logically speaking, she basically had no chance to grab at the scattered pieces of white paper. Of course, in reality, it should also be this way. Then, why would another piece of paper appear in her hand? Actually, this was all credited to Su Luo's innate conman characteristic. This piece of paper was one that she took from her space. Additionally, this piece of paper was presumably one Su Zian would be familiar with, because on top of it was written the sacred scriptures she copied last time. Since she had it pinched in between her fingers, nobody discovered that this was a fake. The most pitiful would be her cheap father, who was staring at this piece of paper, with his eyeballs almost about to pop out. If he knew that in fact, this piece of paper was a fake, surely his expression would be extremely marvelous to look at, right? Luor, quickly bring that piece of paper over here, Su Zian anxiously said. Actually, Su Luo's heart was genuinely curious. In the end, what secrets were written on the real pieces of paper that made Su Zian this worried? However, Su Luo naturally would not return this piece of paper. If she returned it, wouldn't everyone know that she was running a con? One could only see Su Luo frowning. She looked at Beichening, then at Su Zian, as if very uncertain. After quite a while, she indecisively said, "In fact, shouldn't today's main topic be the theft of stolen goods? Honorable father, wouldn't you say so?" Since Su Zian could crawl up to the position of a great general, then how could he be that stupid? He promptly understood and said, "What stolen goods? Rubbish talk. Your courtyard is clean and neat. There is nothing here." Su Luo's appearance once again became hesitant. But mother, older brother and fifth younger sister, didn't all of them denounce this daughter as the person who tried to find someone to frame third older sister? Su Zian broadly waved his hand and sternly responded, "There is absolutely no such thing. That was your mother and them talking rubbish, causing mischief due to selfish reasons, making you suffer from being wronged. This point, Daddy will make them provide you with a formal apology." Why? Madame Su merely felt that today's sunlight was blazing so fiercely. It shined on her until her mind felt waves of dizziness, nearly making her fall over. Married for so many years, she truly didn't expect he would criticize her in front of so many people, saying she spoke nonsense and had caused mischief from selfish motives. This how grave of an accusation was this? Clearly, every decision had been made by him. Not limited to Madame Su, Su Jingyu and Su Shi's expressions were also not very good. They glared at Su Zian with disbelief, and also angrily glared at Su Luo. Who would have thought that even though Su Zian had lowered his posture thus far, Su Luo was still not satisfied. One could see her looking at the messy house that had been thoroughly searched, as she faintly sighed a few times. Alas, now this courtyard has been tossed about into this appearance. It will take a long time to tidy up. No problem. Daddy will order people to help you. Su Zian saw that the corner of Su Luo's mouth had a faint sarcastic meaning. He abruptly came to realize her meaning. He waved his big hands, in a heroic manner as though reaching to the clouds. Daddy will immediately order people to tidy up the East Side Wisteria Park for you to live Indiana. You should be at ease, as at that time, everything you need will be available. What your fifth younger sister has, you would not lack. Chapter 201, The Final Truth 6. Standing beside Su Luo, Beichening really wanted to slap the table and shout out praises for her. This girl was capable. She was simply too capable. Originally, he thought he would have to shoulder the burdensome task of creating a cozy living environment for Su Luo. He never expected that this girl would merely use a piece of worn-out paper, from who knows where that she had found on her body to settle everything. Too great, people simply couldn't help but to admire her. It was no wonder the proud, aloof and picky Nangong was crazy about this girl, to the point of infatuation, and even being head over heels in love. Now, Beichen Ying's gaze at Su Luo could be called as being full of starlight and radiating with lights of devoted worship. It was unfortunate that the girl he was worshipping didn't have time to pay attention to him. She was still standing there secured in her backing, like a lion with her mouth wide open for more. Her worried expression was all feigned. Sometimes this daughter wants to go out for a walk, but the guards at the gate, alas. That's nothing. You take this piece of RIP plate from now on. Wherever you want to go, then just go. Absolutely no one will impede or hinder you from going. Su Zian pulled down the RIP plate from his waist and directly tossed it to Su Luo. Good stuff. Su Luo secretly praised in her heart. However, if the dear readers thought that Su Luo would stop at this point, then all of you were gravely mistaken. If there were convenient advantages that she didn't take, then she would be a damn idiot. Su Luo always believed in this saying. If you have the power and did not use it, then once it expired it was wasted. This were also words of wisdom that Su Luo believed in. Now, all those that she had demanded were far from reaching Su Zian's bottom line. Su Luo pretended to be hesitant and said, Honorable Father promised before, if you can't find the gold during the search, you will return me my innocent verdict. Do those words still count? Right now, Su Zian was eagerly waiting for Su Luo to raise her conditions, because as long as conditions exist, then there would be room to maneuver. Naturally it counts. Su Zian answered hastily. He impatiently stared at that piece of paper, itching to throw himself over there to tear it up. In that case, shouldn't all the people from the Su family at the scene pour tea and apologize to this daughter? Su Luo saw Su Zian's complexion darkened, and secretly thought about it. The Crown Prince and Bei Qining were both present. Lowering Su Zian's face too much would not be good. Therefore, she corrected herself and said, Without a doubt, Daddy used all his might on behalf of this daughter to clarify the facts, thus giving back this daughter her innocent verdict. Naturally, you don't need to apologize. Su Zian was just waiting for these words, after having heard what was said, just as he about to speak. But who would have thought that Su Jingyu rushed in first? One could only see Su Jingyu spitting with anger. Glaring at Su Luo apoplectically, he said, Su Luo, you shouldn't be too greedy from winning an inch, and then wanting a mile. Be careful that once you eat it, you would spit it all out. A threat, it really was a naked threat. Before Su Luo could react, Bei Qining struck a posture to go and take that piece of paper from Su Luo's hand. Just now, this lord did not carefully look. Bring it here. And once again, let this lord have a good look. Su Zian's expression immediately underwent a huge change. He loudly berated Su Jingyu. Unfilial son. Obey your father and shut up. Su Zian's furious expression seemed extremely terrifying. The next word intimidated Su Jingyu, and he came to a halt. Su Jingyu was angry from the bottom of his heart, but could only hatefully kick the pillar. He dared not issue another objection. Consequently, under Su Zian's supervision, beginning from Madame Su, to Su Jingyu, and then Su Shi, even though they were extremely unwilling, nevertheless, they were unable to resist Su Zian's side glare, which was just like a tiger watching his prey. So to speak, people with trump cards in hand were really cool. Madame Su was not too bad, even though her heart was full of wrath, but her face was all smiles. However, Su Jingyu and Su Shi were not very proper. With a bang sound, they tossed their teacup onto the table. The tea flew in all directions. The venerable Bei Qinying's eyebrows nodded, and General Su Zian promptly started to berate them. As a result, Su Jingyu and Su Shi, no matter how unwilling, still had to put on a good face and put in the effort. They had to respectfully invite Su Luo to have tea and apologize to her. Su Zian impatiently watched Su Luo. Now, can you return that piece of paper to Daddy? Whoever would return it was an idiot. The corner of Su Luo's mouth evoked a calm smile. She unhurriedly tore apart that piece of paper until it was nothing but fine powder. Chapter 202. A New Beginning 1. Seeing the paper being torn into fine powder, Su Zian's heart could finally relax. In fact, how could he have known that the piece of paper was something Su Luo had brought out to scare him? This farce of a play finally ended. Before she left, Su Shi intentionally walked to the front of Su Luo. Her appearance was wrathful and malevolent. Su Luo, you just wait for it. Later, there will be a time when you will be humiliated. Today's matter was a huge psychological blow to Su Shi. She was the classy daughter of the first wife. Normally, in front of Su Luo, she was as arrogant as a princess. Yet today, she had to pour tea and apologize to her in front of so many people. And not only her, but also her older brother, her mother. This was humiliation. It really was pure humiliation. This kind of humiliation in the future, she would absolutely return it to her 100, no 1,000-fold. Sushi very fiercely glared at Su Luo. That meaningful glare of hers was like a vengeful mother wolf. It was as if she would pounce upon Su Luo at any time and devour her until even the bones would not be left behind. However, faced with her threat, Su Luo merely smiled faintly. Her smiling expression was disregarding. Good, I'm waiting. I welcome you, the fifth Miss Su. Any time to take your revenge. Sushi, this kind of spoiled Miss High and Mighty, was in fact the easiest to handle. She never even entered Su Luo's eyes. Instead, if it was Su Qing, she must treat with caution. Sushi coldly snorted repeatedly. Good, very good. Su Luo, these are the words you said yourself. When the time comes, don't bother kneeling to beg for forgiveness. Humph. Once she finished speaking, Sushi haughtily turned around and left. She left Su Luo the conceited view of her back. Beichening still hadn't left. His smile was not quite a smile as he shook his head. TSK, 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 living in this kind of surroundings really made you suffer. Little Luo Luo. Su Luo, with both hands crossed over her chest, leisurely slanted him a glance. Little Luo Luo? Is this a name you can call? Alike, really alike. This expression, this tone, and also this posture, was printed from the same exact mold as Nangong. He couldn't help but to say that these two were indeed similar. It was unknown from where Beichening managed to extract out a folded fan. He carelessly fanned it while lifting his chin, tilting his head towards her and arrogantly asked, "Aren't you curious why I continuously helped you?" Su Luo saw his arrogant and pampered appearance. She thought he looked ridiculous, but her face remained indifferent, saying, "Not curious, but if you can tell me the secret in that blue leather book, maybe I could listen with respectful attention." Huh? Why did he feel as though their positions were reversed? She obviously should be incessantly questioning him closely instead. She truly was not a cute girl. Perhaps in the future I could use it to threaten a certain person, Su Luo calmly said. As it turned out, her curiosity was for this purpose. Beichening grudgingly closed his fan. He knew that if he wanted to pull out her and Nangong's gossip from this girl's mouth, it clearly was not possible. Wanna know? Beichening was all smiles as he leaned close to Su Luo, revealing two white canine teeth and shallow dimples. He gave the impression of being very wily, but exceptionally adorable at the same time. Now you can tell me. Su Luo nodded her head. Hey, unfortunately I won't tell you. Beichening pulled back his arrogant, pampered and show-off face and lifted his chin. Want to know, then go ask Nangong. That stuff that could harm people was provided by him. It truly turned out to be him. Su Luo had a faint guess, because a person who could ask Beichening to set out in the capital was almost non-existent. Of course, His Highness Prince Jean was an exception. Remember to go look for him. Beichening he laughed, waved his fan while swaying like a dandish lord and walked away. Chapter 203, A New Beginning, 2. Should I go look for him? Nangong Liuyun's beautiful, demonically alluring face appeared in Su Luo's mind, and also his forceful, overbearing temper. That day when she came back, he apparently had some words to say, but she changed the topic. Ultimately, she had to hurriedly rush back to her courtyard. It had already been quite a few days that she hadn't seen him. However, should she go look for him? Su Luo shook her head. Right now, she still could not stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Even if she went to look for him, what was the use? Similar to the affair that occurred today, why would Su Zian and the Crown Prince be afraid of Beichening? It was because of his own strength and his family background. So to speak, in the end it was still strength. Currently, she should not be tangled up in the question of whether to see Nangong Liuyun or not. What she ought to do was to raise her cultivation level. To strive to stand at the summit of the strong as soon as possible. Only at that time would she have the chance to choose, and also the strength to safeguard her happiness. Su Zian's actions this time were considered very fast. In less than 2 hours, Wisteria Park was tidied up. Lu Luo also moved in together with Su Luo. Once she entered the courtyard, Lu Luo's eyes simply could not handle what she was seeing. A pair of eyes full of stars blinked, as if extremely moved. "Miss, this is where we will live in from now on." Lu Luo was so excited that she had completely lost her normal composure. Even though she was speaking to Su Luo, her eyes however were looking all over the place with joyful surprise. "It's merely a residence, what's there to be excited about? Wait until later." Su Luo suddenly stopped her mouth, because she saw a row of 4 maids as pretty as flowers standing in front of her. Each and every one of them was fertile, thin as a swallow, and had an elegant countenance. This looked like the scene of a beauty contest, and not as if they were here to serve a person. "Good day to the 4th Mississippi," the 4 maids said simultaneously. Su Luo frowned slightly. When she was at the courtyard far from here, there was just Lu Luo and her, mutually depending on each other to live. Everything was also very simple, but now that there were these extra maids serving her, moreover, Su Luo's gaze swept around once. Without having to think, within these 4 maids there was certainly Madame Su's people. After instructing Lu Luo to grow more cleverness, Su Luo looked after herself and entered the bedroom. At night, Su Luo laid on the bed. Her mind was thinking of many things. Now that she had cultivated to the 2nd rank bottleneck, if relying on her own efforts, she didn't know how long she would stagnate at this stage. However, if she had crystal stones to help, then it was another cup of tea altogether. Crystal stone, Su Luo's pair of beautiful eyes became more and more bright. With the adorable little dragon that could automatically hunt for any treasure present, why would she be afraid of losing when betting on crystal stones? What's more, the gold coins dug out from the hole was still hot. Since it was delivered by people with kindness, then not using it would be a waste. The corner of Su Luo's mouth perked up into a sarcastic smile. "Madam Su, sushi sujing, you wait for it. Later on, your daily lives will absolutely be exciting." The second morning, Su Luo had already gotten up earlier. After she finished making herself presentable, Su Luo, in front of all the servants' faces, established Lu Luo's unique and unmatched position as the head maid. Afterwards, she held the adorable little dragon and walked out. Because of the secret of her space, Su Luo therefore had no intention of taking Lu Luo girl with her. In the garden, hundreds of flowers strived for beauty. A burst of cool breeze slowly arrived. The fragrance assailed the nostrils, gladdening the heart. Seeing the beautiful, wonderful butterflies fluttering among the flowers, the adorable little dragon struggled to get down from Su Luo's embrace. The foolish and silly, adorable little dragon's thoughts were easiest to guess. Su Luo recalled that butterfly being pounced on from before, and with the body accidentally destroyed without leaving a trace, and the corner of her mouth moved. She rubbed his head. "Alas, stop making a disturbance. Later when we go out, you can then play, all right." If other people caught sight of a snow-white puppy puffing out fire, Su Luo couldn't help but touch her forehead. Towards that kind of outcome, she would be somewhat speechless. Chapter 204. A New Beginning 3. Awa, the adorable little dragon rolled about in Su Luo's embrace, acting like a spoiled child rolling around. However, his small paws excitedly pointed at that tiny butterfly. Just when a person and a spoiled pet were noisily playing around, all of a sudden, Su Luo sensed a dangerous gaze locked onto her. This gaze seemed to contain a hatred that was carved in the bones and engraved in the heart. It burned into her back until it became burning hot. Who could it be? Su Luo deliberately turned her head around. Not far away, Sushi's hand was pulling at an elegant and exquisite female while walking over. Today's Sushi was dressed in a red silk gown that wound lovingly along her body. Her face was white as beautiful porcelain with a pair of jet black, limpid eyes and laid on top. She was vivacious and pretty. If she hadn't revealed her spoiled and headstrong side, she looked remarkably like a young beautiful woman that would invoke tender affectionate feelings in others. The name of that elegant and exquisite female was Su Qing. One merely saw her appearing indifferent, giving people a kind of clear, cold and noble feeling. Sushi walked in front of Su Luo and arrogantly lifted her chin, looking up and down. Then she haughtily and fussily slanted a glance at Su Luo. "Oh, not bad. Just having moved into a new courtyard. Yet you have the carefree and leisurely thought to come out for a stroll?" Su Luo's expression was serene. She only faintly smiled while taking a quick glance at her. She was holding the adorable little dragon in her arms, while leisurely stroking his fur. The adorable little dragon comfortably sprawled on his back in Su Luo's arms, showing off his plump belly. The him in a sleeping haze gave off tiny sounds of snoring, looking charmingly naive and unspeakably cute. Sushi saw that Su Luo did not respond, as if completely ignoring her words. An angry color momentarily flashed across her face. Her fine and slender forefinger pointed at Su Luo. You are merely a good-for-nothing that was stepped on by the soles of people's feet. What are you so proud of? Don't think that just because Daddy bestowed a courtyard to you it would mean that he regards you highly. Hey, Su Luo. I want to see how many days you can stay in that courtyard. Su Luo indifferently shrugged her shoulders and lightly replied. Finish speaking? Being cursed at with a finger pointed at her nose, and she was still this calm? Sushi's heart was stunned, yet she couldn't help admitting that the Su Luo now was more difficult to deal with than the her before. The her before, she merely had to harshly glare at her, and Su Luo would become a yes man. She wouldn't even know where to place her hands and feet. The present her, in the end, what great ambition and leopard guts did she eat, that she would dare to be so emboldened? Sushi's face became red and pointed at Su Luo. Don't think that I wouldn't dare to deal with you. I tell you, I can do anything to you. Su Luo faintly smiled. I welcome you anytime. A dog able to yell out wouldn't bite people. Real dogs that normally bite people would not yell. Su Qing's gaze was light as a feather as it was cast at Su Luo. She once again frowned and her eyes widened. From her point of view, even just glancing at Su Luo was already enough of a good fortune that Su Luo would pray for with 8 lives. As for speaking, she seemed to feel that speaking to Su Luo would bring down her own status. However, how could Su Qing let Su Luo bully her own younger sister? Su Qing was only seen faintly smiling, while pointing at the adorable little dragon in Su Luo's arms. Her voice was clear and cold while showing a trace of dignity. Merely a good-for-nothing unexpectedly. You actually learned to play with contract beasts from other people. Laughable. Sushi's gaze landed on Su Luo's arms. When she saw that little puppy sleeping sprawled on its back, she immediately laughed. She laughed until her body rocked back and forth, simply unable to stop. After a long time, she finally gasped out a breath, inarticulately saying, Su Luo haha dying of laughter. Only you a good-for-nothing would raise a dog, the same kind of good-for-nothing animal. Ha ha, ha indeed, what kind of owner would have that kind of pet? Ha ha, ha makes me laugh to death. Chapter 205. A New Beginning 4. Sushi laughed so loudly and arrogantly that she had woken up the adorable little dragon, who with great difficulty had fallen into a deep slumber. The adorable little dragon rubbed his sleepy eyes as he lethargically sat up in Su Luo's arms. At this moment Sushi said to Su Qing, Second older sister, we should let this good-for-nothing Su Luo see what a real spirit pet looks like, right? Su Qing's spirit pet was a 4th-ranked fierce panther. Its wild nature was difficult to train, quite cold and proud. However, its fighting strength was very powerful. Su Qing shot a quick glance at Su Luo. She felt it was necessary to give this concubine's daughter, who was unable to distinguish between good from bad and lacked proper respect for her seniors, a lesson. Consequently, she lightly nodded her head and closed her eyes to mouth the words to the spell. Very quickly, from far away, a formidable majestic panther ran over. One could see an abnormally large body that seemed not to yield to an elephant in size. Its entire body was covered in a brownish-black fur that was smooth and stuck to its body, giving off a dim gloss. Its hunting teeth were sharp and pointed. They flashed with an intimidatingly cold light. That pair of eyes, which were apathetic and ice-cold, as if watching a dead person, stared at Su Luo. Sushi had an extremely proud of herself smile on her face. She pulled at Su Qing's hand and provokingly said, Older sister, we should allow Su Luo to experience and know what's a real spirit pet. This will also let her expand her horizons, right? Her remarks about experience were not quite as simple as the literal meaning. Sushi saw that Su Qing was non-committal, so she once again pulled at Su Qing's sleeves and acted coquettishly as she said, Second sister, isn't it because we are doing this for Su Luo's own good? We are allowing her to see some aspects of society, so as to prevent her from going out and bringing shame to our family. Su Qing's pair of coldy clear haughty eyes were once again cast upon Su Luo's body. It could clearly be seen that she nodded her head. There is another benefit. After my fierce panther returned home, it has lacked a person to amuse itself with. Lacked a person to amuse itself with? Su Luo's beautiful eyebrows rose slightly while the corner of her mouth hooked into a mocking arc. Su Qing was indeed named correctly. Like her name, she was so proud, virtuous, and aloof that there was no limit. Whatever the case, Su Luo was also nominally Su Qing's younger sister. With just one sentence, Su Qing had given Su Luo to the fierce panther to toy with? A real human had been given to a fierce panther to play with? This was indeed an extraordinary spirit pet. Su Luo was not furious. On the contrary, she smiled. She shot a contemptuous glance at Su Qing. Lacked a person to amuse itself with. What if it was destroyed while playing with other people? Are you going to demand compensation? Before Su Qing could speak, Su Shi once again covered her stomach and started to laugh uproariously. What are you saying? Destroy a panther by playing with it? Ha ha, ha ha yeah. You really want to make me laugh to death. The panther is a 4th-ranked magical beast, 4th rank. Who do you think you are? You are nothing but a good-for-nothing without any spirit strength. Su Qing shot a scornful glance at Su Luo. She was too lazy to waste words with people that were beneath her. Fierce panther, go. Accompany her and play with her properly. Since this loathsome girl Su Luo wanted to court death, then she, Su Qing, shouldn't be blamed for whatever happens. As it happened, just yesterday mother and her siblings had suffered embarrassment due to this girl. Now she just so happened to be able to help them vent their anger. She believed that once father found out, he would also not say anything more. After the fierce panther heard its master's command, immediately its 4 sturdy legs dug into the ground as it moved. A pair of unsympathetic eyes momentarily ignited with bloodthirsty light. Its majestic and imposing manner saturated the air around its body. Roar! The fierce panther immediately issued a howling sound that shook the sky. Its huge and well-built body abruptly pounced towards Su Luo. Thick shadows hid the sky and covered the earth with an aura of death. With a pair of ice-cold bloodthirsty eyes and its ferocious mouth opened wide, Su Luo believed that the fierce panther would absolutely not be lenient. There was nothing left to be said. She may have no choice but to reveal the fact that she knows martial arts. Just at this critical moment, the adorable little dragon that was woken up by the noise rubbed its drowsy, sleepy eyes and suddenly lifted his head. That pair of commonly foolish and silly limpid eyes, all of a sudden, were enveloped in a layer of golden light. Chapter 206, New Beginning 5. With him standing on Su Luo's shoulder, they faced the panther lunging at them head-on. He had a dignified and austere expression, and released a howling sound that echoed to the sky and penetrated through the earth. A whoa-whoa-whoa, his serious little face and appearance was stretched taut. His tiny claw furiously pointed at the fierce panther, as if saying it should be facing him with the right posture, and made it seem like the one pouncing over was not a 4th-ranked magical beast, but an insubordinate servant. Seeing the little divine dragon's deadly serious appearance, Su Shi instantly convulsed with laughter. Dear heavens, that puppy and his master were really made from the same mold. Both were overestimating themselves. Did the puppy really think that it could challenge a 4th-ranked magical beast, the fierce panther? The corners of Su Qing's lips were similarly raised in an arrogant and aloof sneer. Blockhead. An ant trying to shake a large tree, overconfident. Whether or not they were truly overconfident, the matter very quickly became apparent. Just when the panther was about an arm's length away from Su Luo, its immense body suddenly and forcibly twisted around at the scene. However, to twist an enormous body in midair, it was easier said than done. As a result, only a loud thump sound could be heard. The massive panther inevitably fell to the ground, raising a cloud of yellow clay dust, knocking itself dizzy and confused. This action instantly stunned everyone. Shouldn't the panther be pouncing on Su Luo? Why would it fall down for no reason? Moreover, tossing itself down into such a sorry state? Seeing it unable to rise for a long time, Su Qing's eyes grew bloodshot. Her eyes, which were full of rage, in a flash glared at Su Luo. What did you do? Su Luo nonchalantly spread her hands. Did you see me do anything? She really was innocent. She did not do anything. Speaking of the culprit, shouldn't it be the little divine dragon that did something? Unfortunately, in the eyes of everyone, the grand little divine dragon was just a puppy who hadn't even grown its fur yet. Su Qing was stonewalled immediately. Indeed, previously she had kept a close eye on Su Luo. Her expression was serious and on guard, but she also never made a move. Then in the end, how could this happen? It couldn't be that the panther suddenly lost its mind? If Su Qing was to believe that it was because of the puppy's angry rebuke that the panther would take such action, she wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. At the same time, Su Shi was also astonished, with her mouth gaping wide open. For a long time, she could not regain her composure. Well, what really happened? This panther was fourth ranked. How many fourth-ranked magical beasts could be found in the whole of the Eastern Ling Empire? However, how did this loathsome girl accomplish this? This was really seeing a ghost. In fact, regarding this kind of result, it was also beyond Su Luo's expectations. She knew that the adorable little dragon was the most noble class of divine dragon among the dragon race. Although she knew its dragon prestige was extremely awesome, but she had also never thought that its effect would be this shocking. Su Luo rubbed the adorable little dragon's head, while the latter affectionately licked her fingers. Both person and spirit pet looked extremely affectionate together. Panther, get up. You better stand up. Su Qing furiously yelled. How could her panther lose to Su Luo? How could she, Su Qing, lose to Su Luo, that pile of mud? This was even harder for her to accept than being killed. The panther had thrown itself until it was dizzy. Shaking its head, it staggered to its feet. Oh, with round, angry eyes glaring in a cold frown, the adorable little dragon snapped at it. Posing with that little face and that imposing majestic manner, it was like a haughty little prince angrily reprimanding a servant. So loftily up high, as if it should be rightfully his. Hearing that sound, the panther, which had gotten its large body to stand with much difficulty, swayed on the spot, almost falling again. Chapter 207, Skyrocketing Luck. 1. The fierce panther managed to stand up with great difficulty. However, even if it stood up, in front of Su Luo, no, it would be more accurate to say, in front of the adorable little dragon. Its enormous body appeared to be cowering with two forelegs lowered beneath it. Its appearance was one of prostrating in worship, and being extremely deferential to the master that it served. This was simply humiliating. Su Qing stared at her panther. Her pair of eyes were practically spitting out fire. After many trials and tribulations, expending large amount of manpower and resources, in the end she even had to ask her teacher for help so she could tame this panther. Who would have thought that it would be an idiot of a panther? What was that over there? A puppy? It was a puppy. A normal puppy that still hadn't grown all its teeth. What was it afraid of? And even shivering from head to toe? Don't tell me it actually thought that it was a dragon? A golden divine dragon? Su Qing was really infuriated to death by this stupid panther. No matter how much she thought of it, she could not understand how this kind of reversal could have happened. Yet, here there was someone at her side pouring salt into her wound. Su Shi could be seen moving closely to Su Qing, tugging at her sleeve with a face full of incomprehension, and asked, Elder sister? Your panther, it's not an idiot, right? An idiot? A panther, which could cultivate to the 4th rank among the magical beasts. Could it be considered an idiot panther? Shut up. Su Qing was obviously in a bad mood. Her beautiful eyes was ablaze as it landed on the panther's body. She concentrated all of her spiritual power within them. Pointing at Su Luo, she was heard, though only faintly, giving an order in an imposing voice. Go rip her apart. Even the pampered and willful Su, she would not dare to go overboard with her in public. Yet Su Qing directly ordered the panther to rip Su Luo apart? TSK, Su Qing was Su Qing. Nobody would think that when comparing viciousness and ruthlessness among her brothers and sisters, she could be considered number 1. Su Luo casually gazed at the panther, believing that even without her needing to act, the panther would help in avenging her. Sure enough, The panther did not disappoint Su Luo. Its misty eyes looked back at Su Qing with a flash of confusion within them, as if it could understand her order. I said bite her to death. Su Qing raged from being humiliated, pointing at Su Luo and stressed each syllable between gritted teeth. Whether or not Su Luo died was not important to her. Anyway, in her eyes Su Luo was just an ant. There was no need to be concerned about. However, the panther she had spent so much sweat and blood to tame now had a problem. This was the reason for her display of pent-up frustration and irritability. Although the adorable little dragon was still an inarticulate infant dragon. However, understanding the human language was his innate gift. He naturally could understand what he heard. When Su Qing pointed at Su Luo and repeatedly ordered the panther to bite Su Luo to death over and over again. As Su Luo's spirit pet, the adorable little dragon expressed great anger. And to make a divine golden dragon angry, even if it was an infant one, the consequences would be very severe. The little adorable dragon could be seen climbing onto Su Luo's shoulder. His tiny face was pinched, and his tiny paw pointed at Su Qing. He angrily barked at the panther. AWO! 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 No one understood what nonsense this little thing was shouting, but clearly the panther could. Yet on the other side, Su Qing still continued to scold the panther, commanding it to stand and attack, until even Su Luo's chewed-up bones were not left behind. The orders from the little divine dragon and Su Qing both came at the same time, intermingled in the panther's mind. The panther's expression gradually grew anxious. Its breathing became heavier and heavier. It appeared more brutal and ferocious. The dangerous atmosphere on its body grew increasingly dense and increasingly more terrifying. Roar! A deep and heavy dragon cry came from the little divine dragon's mouth. His little body swayed around before he collapsed into Su Luo's arms. Chapter 208, Skyrocketing Luck 2. The little divine dragon limply fell down, as if he had used up all his strength with that howl just now. Su Luo worriedly hugged him, taking advantage of the fact that they were caught off guard. She hurriedly took out a cup of celestial spirit water from her space and fed it to the little divine dragon. After feeding him the cup of celestial spirit water, the little divine dragon's spirit clearly began to recover. However, in the wake of the little divine dragon's howl, a dazzling golden radiance suddenly flared from the fierce panther's body. Now the panther's appearance was exceptionally malevolent, with sharp fangs shining, as if it had lost all rational thoughts. It looked ruthless and vengeful. In a split second, it suddenly pounced forward. In front of it was not Su Luo, but Su Qing. Su Qing was startled into taking a step back from this sudden surprise attack. She instinctively threw out a counterattack. Her heart was immediately stunned, but this fierce panther was her spirit pet. How could it be possible that a spirit pet would attack its own master? Not to mention in the Eastern Ling Empire. Even on the entire continent there was no such precedence. Su Qing was furious as well as anxious. She completely lost her virtuous, proud and aloof appearance from before. Now, she had lost her head out of fear, and was on the verge of falling apart. The fierce panther right now seemed to have lost its mind. It appeared to have sunk into a deranged state. Su Qing's counterattack decisively removed its hostility to others. As a result, even though there were many people present, the fierce panther only bit Su Qing tightly and wouldn't let go. Su Qing was so furious that she almost fell. She had no choice but to counterattack in self-defense. She had been chased by her own spirit pet until she was battered and exhausted. This was indeed the most ridiculously amusing scene under the sky. Losing a priceless fourth-ranked magical beast was still tolerable. But now, this magical beast had turned around and attacked her. This simply made her gnash her teeth in hatred. She nearly vomited out a mouthful of blood. Su Qing was fourth-ranked, and the fierce panther was also fourth-ranked. Speaking in accordance with the continent's customary convention, the same ranked magical beast would be stronger than their human counterpart by a level. And what was more, the current fierce panther was in a berserk state. Its strength had successfully multiplied, climbing up even more. How could Su Qing be its match? One could only see her entire body fall from being heavily pounced upon. The fierce panther who was close at hand, with that huge head nearing, and that blood mouth opened wide, suddenly bit towards Su Qing's head. Su Qing was scared into shrieking, the sound of her shriek ripping throughout the vast sky. It resonated throughout the entire Su manor and its courtyards. The Su Qing at this moment had her hair in disarray, clothing ragged, giving the impression of being battered and bedraggled. How could she still have a trace of that distinctly cold grandeur left? Seeing this, Su Luo couldn't help clapping her hand and shouting out. This skill of the little divine dragon was simply too wonderful. His final howl had destroyed the fierce panther's spirit record. The panther, having lost the spirit record, already could not remember who its master was. His attack was entirely dependent on its instinct. Therefore, Su Qing, who was the closest to it, became its tragic victim. Seeing Su Qing's head was just about to be unprotectable, Su Luo's heart secretly speed up. With regards to this snake-like scorpion of a beauty, who since the beginning wanted to take her life, she didn't have even a little bit of a good impression. Consequently, she naturally wasn't likely to lend a helping hand. Besides, she also didn't have that kind of ability. This proud and aloof peacock like Su Qing, if she was to lose her head, tsk. However, before Su Lu could finish sighing with regret, she suddenly saw an extra person appear at the scene. This person was not a stranger, but was none other than Su Luo's cheap old man Su Zian. Su Zian caught up in a timely manner, and at the last minute, he rescued Su Qing, who had passed out from being scared. Su Luo knew that with Su Zian present, this time, Su Qing wouldn't die. However, the berserk panther was also not easy to deal with. Even the 5th-ranked Su Zian would also need to expend a lot of strength. To say nothing of the fact that now, this panther had already gone insane. Within the entire Su manor, it charged and dashed about in all directions. Whatever stuff it saw, it would destroy, infuriating Su Zian until he almost hopped about with rage. Chapter 209, Skyrocketing Luck 3. This kind of disorderly battle, it was better that she didn't get involved. Once Su Luo thought this far, her footsteps slowly moved back in withdrawal. Taking advantage of Su Zian being engrossed in battling the fierce panther, fuel was added to the soles of her feet as she rapidly slipped away. Capable of making that haughty Su Qing disheveled and miserable to such a degree, surely it was more difficult to bear than killing her, right? Recalling this, the corner of Su Luo's mouth pointed up even higher. Evidently, her mood had become quite good. Within the Su manor, the panther's rampage resulted in scenes of devastation. In contrast, Su Luo strutted out the door with the little divine dragon in her arms. Su Luo thought of that pile of gold coins in her space, heaped up into a small hill, and she decided to directly go and bet on crystal stones. When the crystal stones were extracted from the mines, it was wrapped up in a thick layer of weathered rocks. Even people with high cultivation weren't able to sense whether a crystal stone existed through the layer of rock. Only after cutting it open would you find out. As a result, the industry of gambling on crystal stones was born. In the regions with crystal stone mines, the odds in these gambling halls were slightly higher, at about 1,000 to 1. However, at regions further away from the crystal stone mines, the odds of the bets would become very low. It probably wouldn't even reach the odds of 10,000 to 1. This job of gambling on crystal stones, if you win, you could get rich overnight. If you lose, you might squander the family fortune and go bankrupt. As to gambling on crystal stones, it was basically 10 bets with 9 losses. Even if you win, it might not necessarily be a huge windfall. However, Su Luo was very self-confident. Her self-confidence was not because of herself. Rather, it originated from her belief in the little divine dragon. The little divine dragon had an automatic treasure hunting ability. He could sense if the source stone contained a crystal stone or not, as well as its grade. Su Luo was not fond of gambling. However, she urgently needed crystal stones for cultivation purposes. Therefore, she naturally wouldn't let this kind of easy pickings to slip by. Along the way, she asked for directions. Su Luo directly arrived at the capital's biggest source stone marketplace. The marketplace was huge. It was about 10 times bigger than a soccer field. Whenever a new batch of source stones were shipped over, the marketplace would be the liveliest. There would be a large number of people moving about like a never-ending stream. And today, by a lucky chance, was the day new source stones would arrive. Su Luo had really caught this opportunity by chance. Su Luo felt out a gold coin from her clothing. While walking, she would fiddle with it. She planned to use this single gold coin to win a source stone that could support her cultivation for a period of time. However, a single gold coin could only let her enter and stroll around in the common small stores. She couldn't even enter the larger shops with just a single gold coin. Su Luo looked around along the way. There were many small stores. In addition, there were some shop owners that directly arranged their goods on the ground. Young lady, want to buy some rough stones? These source stones are all transported directly from the southwest mining area. It didn't make any stopovers along the way. Look here, with this red-colored mark on top. It's extremely likely that this will have a red crystal stone inside. When Su Luo passed by a street stall with goods on the ground, a plump middle-aged man called out and Su Luo stopped. He didn't lose any time trying to sell his source stones to her. His place here was a little out of the way, and his supply of goods was also not complete. Many wealthy people would directly go to the larger shops, a rare few would stop by. However, Su Luo's footsteps stopped, because the little divine dragon in her arms had all of a sudden woken up from its rest. Red. The little divine dragon pointed at the yellowish source stone in the middle-aged fellow's hand and called towards Su Luo, but his eyelids were still drooping, as if not very interested in it. Are you saying that it's a red-colored crystal stone? Su Luo became excited all of a sudden and urgently asked the little divine dragon in her head. The little divine dragon unconcernedly nodded his little head. Su Luo was excited, not because of that red-colored source stone, rather, that the little divine dragon could actually spit out human speech. Although it was simply just jumping out word by word, still compared to the awu before, it was a vast improvement. Chapter 210 Skyrocketing Luck 4. Why would he be able to speak at this time? Could it be, don't tell me, it was somehow related to that last howl when he commanded the panther? If that was the case, then she really did profit from a disaster. Su Luo's thoughts became joyful, and she used more force to rub his little head. The little dragon being able to talk was really great. Now it would be more convenient for her to gamble on stones. Otherwise, they would be like chickens speaking with ducks, having a hard time communicating. Young lady, seeing as you are this beautiful, your luck should also be as pretty. How about cutting one open to test your luck? Maybe it really will have a red-colored crystal stone. This piece of source stone is not expensive. It will cost you no more than 1 gold coin. The middle-aged fellow saw that Su Luo had halted her footsteps, so he put more energy into selling it. Su Luo lightly smiled and said, "Since this elder brother is so optimistic, why don't you yourself cut it open and check? Maybe inside there really is a red-colored crystal stone. Then you would make a huge profit." Even though red-colored crystal stones were the lowest grade among crystal stones, because there weren't much of it, so the price was still not cheap. The starting price was at least 100 gold coins. The middle-aged fellow sighed. "My hand is too black one." Previously other people who bought source stones from me could cut out a crystal stone. I bought source stones for myself for decades, but couldn't cut out a single one. Wouldn't you say that my hand is black? Black, moreover extremely black, so black that it was limitless. Su Luo held the little divine dragon in one hand, and used the other to hand the middle-aged man a single gold coin. "Okay, then just this one. Then I will trouble uncle to cut out for me." That piece of source stone weighed more than 5 kilograms, and was not very convenient to carry along. Consequently, Su Luo chose to cut it open on the spot. Seeing that he had succeeded in doing this business, the middle-aged man naturally was all smiles. But he looked at Su Luo with a sad air. "Young lady, you really want me to cut it open? My hand is truly very black." The implication was for Su Luo not to blame him if he couldn't cut out a crystal stone. Su Luo smiled, carelessly waved her hand and said, "No matter, if you cut something out. As long as uncle doesn't keep it, then everything will be fine." It was merely a piece of red crystal stone. She wasn't in the mood to use her own hand to cut it out. How could I do that? Look, it's all here written in black ink on the white piece of paper. Money for the goods have now been received, and the bill settled. The middle-aged man gave Su Luo a receipt. Su Luo smiled. Then time to cut it open. The little divine dragon said that inside it there was a red-colored crystal stone. Then she was absolutely assured that there was one. The middle-aged fellow adjusted the positing of the stone a little. He first made a vertical cut, and immediately, a puff of dust filled the air. The part of the source stone that was cut was still grayish-white in color, without even a trace of containing a crystal stone. The middle-aged fellow looked at his own pair of hands, and then lifted his head to look somewhat apologetically at Su Luo. No problem, continue to cut. I believe in your luck. Su Luo's smile was unperturbed. Her eyes carried a touch of encouragement. In fact, it wasn't because she believed in his luck, but it was that she believed in the little divine dragon's treasure-hunting ability. This time, she had come out to cut source stones, and could also in passing, wash off the man's black hands. At this moment, a person on the side suddenly went closer. He was wearing a robe made of cloth, and was wearing a Chinese skullcap on his head, a face with a shrewd mouth and monkey cheeks. At a glance, people could tell that he was not good to get along with. He coldly looked at the middle-aged man and sneeringly said, "Lu Qi, you still dare to cut source stones? Aren't you afraid of giving your bad luck to the customer?" Finished speaking, the shrewd-mouthed and monkey-cheeks fellow with a bantering smile said to Su Luo, "Young lady, is this your first time here? You may not know Lu Qi, this stand, hasn't cut out a crystal stone in a year already. People who understand a little of this business wouldn't buy from him. Young lady, you were fooled." Lu Qi's expression changed slightly. His hand holding the source stone faintly trembled. He angrily glared at that man. One, black. I kept the literal Chinese translation. It really mean bad luck or unlucky. So Chinese people who are unlucky usually say their hands are black. Chapter 211. Skyrocketing Luck 5. Ultimately, he didn't say anything, slumping with his hand hanging down. In fact, his hands were truly black. Su Luo shot a glance at the man who had caused a disturbance. Then her gaze returned to Lu Qi's body. Her smiling expression was easygoing and unperturbed. "Uncle Lu, why did you stop? Please continue. So what if you don't cut out a crystal stone? Isn't it just a single gold coin? This miss will consider it as spending money to ask people to demonstrate stone cutting." That shrewd-mouthed and monkey-cheeked man glared at Su Luo, and secretly cursed. Unable to tell good from bad, Su Luo was too lazy to bother dealing with this kind of nasty person. After the facts were revealed, was the moment when he would really get slapped in the face. Lu Qi concentrated his thoughts, and from the side, made two separate cuts. What made people disappointed was that after the cuts, it still only had the same grayish-white color. Not a trace of any other color could be seen. Snort, the shrewd-mouthed and monkey-cheeked man let out a jeering sound. "I already said Lu Qi's black hand in this lifetime. He won't be able to cut out a crystal stone. If he could cut out a red-colored crystal stone. If he could cut out a crystal stone. What are you going to do?" Su Luo cast a sidelong glance at him. Regarding this kind of nasty character that would run over to other people's family door to compete for business, she had always disliked. She was unlikely to go and deliberately deal with this kind of person, but if this person doggedly ran into her, then don't blame her for being rude. The shrewd-mouthed and monkey-cheeked man merely said it flippantly, but unexpectedly, was caught and countered by Su Luo. He was also a person who worried about losing face, and firmly believed that Lu Qi wouldn't cut out a crystal stone. On the spot he slapped the table and said, "If he cuts out a crystal stone, even if it's only a red-colored crystal stone, I, Ho-san, will immediately swallow this source stone." Su Luo followed along Ho-san's gaze and looked. His finger pointed at a source stone that was about the size of a basin used for washing faces. "To swallow this piece of source stone? Okay, this is possible. Since it's like this, I ask all the people present to act as witness." Su Luo saw the crowd gradually approach to surround them. Her laugh was evil and cunning. "Of course, I also cannot let you be at a disadvantage. If Uncle Lu can't cut out a crystal stone, Then this miss will immediately compensate you with 100 gold coins. Don't assume that just because Su Luo, without much action, had easily happened upon gold coins when needed, that she would feel that gold coins had little value. In fact, with regards to ordinary citizens, the value of gold coins were still very high. Many ordinary citizens wouldn't have a single gold coin in their hands. What they always used were either silver or copper coins. Good. Ho San, take this bet with you. Everyone present will act as witnesses. Ho San was so delighted that it went to his head. Lu Qi, that shop, had for exactly 1 year been unable to cut out a crystal stone from a source stone. How could he be so fortunate this time that he would cut one out today? Moreover, just a moment ago, he had already made 3 cuts, and not a fart could be seen. No matter how you looked at it, he couldn't possibly cut out a crystal stone. 100 gold coins. As long as he agreed, then he would get a full 100 gold coins. It was enough for him to spend extravagantly for quite a while. Only if he was a fool would he refuse such a good business. Now Lu Qi had become somewhat tense. Even his hands were trembling. He truly had no confidence in his black hands. Young lady, how about you yourself do it? Who would have thought that Su Luo merely smiled and waved her hands? Her smile was casual and unruffled. No harm. You should continue to cut. Maybe following this your fortune will change for the better. Your luck may not be good, but this Mrs. Luck has always been exceedingly great. If only it was possible. Lu Qi forced a smile, but his heart didn't really believe it. For lack of a better option, he made the final cut. After making so many cuts and still nothing, there was no need for hope and expectation in this final cut. Lu Qi put down his cutting knife and was just about to apologize to Su Luo. But unexpectedly, when he lifted his head, he saw that the surrounding people without exception had all released a mouthful of cold air in amazement. Chapter 212. The scene of gambling on stones. Lu Qi followed along everyone's gaze and looked, and discovered that under his own cut, a trace of light red color was revealed. Although this trace of red line didn't attract people, however, that flexible, sleek feel was very strong. At the scene, there were excited people who started to shout loudly, "A winning bet! A winning bet!" Su Luo faintly smiled. Her eyebrows rose towards Ho San on one side. Seeing that he was just about to stealthily slip away, she raised her voice and said a phrase. "Oh, where is that person who just made the bet?" The people that came and gathered around were, for the most part, people who loved rowdy events. Normally, they were not fond of Ho San's personal conduct. Seeing this, they couldn't help but to follow each other to heckle him. "Ho San, don't go anywhere, this bet isn't finished yet." "Right. The red already appeared and now you want to go, too late. A monk can run away but the temple cannot. Ho San, if you leave, we will take whatever stuff we want from your shop." There were sounds of taunting, derision, and also rowdy jeering. Momentarily, Ho San's complexion was scarlet red, and the people watching in a circle deliberately trapped him in the middle. Even if he wanted to leave, he couldn't walk out. Lu Qi very carefully cut out that piece of red-colored crystal stone. His pair of eyes shone with radiance from being emotionally moved. The hands cupping the source stone was even trembling slightly. Even though it was a red-colored crystal stone worth 100 gold coins, he nevertheless, and without the slightest hesitation, delivered it into Su Luo's hands. He earnestly said, "Young lady, your red-colored crystal stone. You must be careful to safeguard it." Su Luo casually accepted it, without waiting for her to put it in her chest pocket. A few people on the side loudly started to ask, "Young lady, are you going to sell that piece of red-colored crystal stone?" Seeing that there were people inquiring, afraid of speaking late, and not being able to grab it, some people immediately followed after and shouted, "Young lady, I'll give you 100 gold. You should sell this red-colored crystal stone to me." A red-colored crystal stone, with regards to the cultivation of people third-ranked or below, was very useful. Only, even if it was a red-colored crystal stone, there still weren't many of them on the entire continent. "I'll give you 110 gold. I'll give you 120 gold. I'll give you 150 gold." Immediately, The price of this red-colored crystal stone started to climb up, little by little. Even though the market price for a red-colored crystal stone was 100 gold, yet, it couldn't match the free market price. It simply could not meet the demand, and as a result, a red-colored crystal stone's price at an auction was greater than 100 gold. Su Luo faintly smiled and was just about to speak, however, without waiting for her to speak. Someone called out loudly, "Our family's young master offers 300 gold. Who still dares to follow up?" Su Luo lifted her eyes to look over there. From up ahead came a juvenile-aged young master dressed in a magnificent brocade garment. He was about 17 to 18 years old, with a pair of bright and intelligent eyes. His peach blossom facial features were extremely handsome. One could see his whole body issuing out a superior air of arrogance. At first glance, he made Su Luo feel somewhat dissatisfied. The servant by his side was also arrogant and bossy. His haughtiness was out of bounds. Following the arrival of the magnificently dressed young master, all the people present were silent without words. Nobody dared to make further bids, and some people had already quietly slipped away. Now, Lu Qi also used a somewhat concerned gaze to take a quick look at Su Luo. Su Luo merely smiled faintly and cast a quick glance at that magnificently dressed young master. She briefly and clearly said, "Sorry, this miss is not selling the red-colored crystal stone." "Won't sell? Do you know who our noble young master is?" That arrogant servant had his chin lifted up high, scornfully sweeping Su Luo a glance. Whatever their noble young master fancied wasn't something he couldn't obtain. Su Luo's gaze swept around her surroundings once. All of a sudden, she shallowly smiled. As it turned out, this source stone marketplace boasting the freedom to buy and sell, was it merely set to fool people? Is the true state of affairs here actually enforcing people to buy or sell? Chapter 213. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 1. The expression of the young master dressed in brocade stiffened. He arrogantly swept Su Luo with a contemptuous glance. He condescendingly opened his mouth to say, "Loathsome girl, you have a very ferocious little mouth. However, could it be that you came here and haven't asked around about who the master of this raw material marketplace is? Who was the master of this raw material marketplace? This, she sincerely hadn't made any inquiries anyway. Was this of any importance?" A touch of ridicule appeared in Su Luo's eyes as she smiled. "Oh, perhaps it is opened by your family?" If it was really opened by his family, then why would he force her to sell a small piece of red-colored crystal stone? This basically didn't make sense. The brocade-dressed young master smiled with disdain. His folding fan opened with a flip sound. His chin lifted in an immensely proud manner. He arrogantly shot a glance at the dog-like lackey at his side. That lackey understood the knowing glance, and immediately, he became high and mighty again. He pointed at Su Luo with a cold smile and said, "Ha ha, lift up your ears and listen closely. Even though this raw material marketplace was not opened by our young master's family, however, it's almost the same as being opened by our young master's family." Almost the same? It looked like the difference might be huge instead. Su Luo coldly smiled. "Oh, I'd like to hear the details." "Humph humph. I'll tell you. This raw material marketplace was opened by the mercenary union." That dog-like lackey had a "you should be alarmed, terrified and kneel down" expression. The mercenary union? Who knew? When Su Luo heard these two words, she immediately started to smile. If it was opened by other people, maybe her heart would have a bit of fear to restrain her. But since it was Beichen Ying's mercenary union, then Su Luo cast sidelong glances at the brocade-dressed young master with a smile that was not quite a smile. "Oh, it turns out to have been opened by the mercenary union. I respectfully salute them. Only, don't know if this young master is what kind of person at the mercenary union. Are you the division president? The vice president? Or the venerable president?" Su Luo cunningly, without any good intentions, tried to pin all the big titles onto the head of the young master dressed in brocade. Immediately, the brocade-dressed young master became anxious. He shot a quick glare at that dog-like lackey, and that dog-like lackey, at once followed by glaring at Su Luo. He pointed at her and furiously said, "Ignorant and loathsome girl. Don't tell me you are not aware that our family's young master is good friends with President Bai Qining? This raw material marketplace was opened by the venerable Bai Qining, also equivalent to being opened by our young master. Speaking to your type of ignorant, idiotic, loathsome girl truly lowers our status. Small shrimp? Speaking to her would lower their status? Su Luo suddenly felt that her thoughts were somewhat disorderly. Oh, since this raw material marketplace was opened by President Bai Qining, and your family's young master is good friends with the venerable Bai Qining, then presumably, you should have lots of crystal stones. So it's unlikely that you would be interested in my little piece of red-colored crystal stone, right? Su Luo used the main point to counterattack the opposition. He never expected that this loathsome girl's words were this sharp. That dog-like lackey's words were choked off. He furiously glared at Su Luo and turned his head to that brocade-dressed young master to appeal for help. The brocade-dressed young master's face now was somewhat hard to maintain. However, since the matter had already reached this point, if he conceded, it would look as if he was afraid. Then in the future, how could he stand up tall in this raw material marketplace? One could only see the brocade-dressed young master's ice-cold eyes stare at Su Luo, condensing into frost. This young master's home's crystal stones are piled up like a mountain. Still, so what? This young master just wants to buy that piece in your hand. Are you going to sell it or not? Now one could feel an invisible power spreading from his body and pressing down on Su Luo. This belonged to a third-ranked martial artist's pressure. With regards to ordinary citizens, it was simply an existence that defied the natural order. For a moment, everyone's face was alarmed, and they retreated far away from the scene. They were afraid that they would be roped in for no reason at all. A touch of frost flashed through Su Luo's eyes. Chapter 214. Playing tricks on the pretty boy too. A touch of frost flashed through Su Luo's eyes. Was he trying to use martial strength to coerce her into compromising? Did he take her for an easily bullied good-for-nothing without the strength to retaliate? Su Luo stood motionless in place. Her gaze was as clear and cold as water. Her slender eyebrows were folded into an austere appearance, with chilling air coming through her pupils. She only faintly smiled in that way, with her ice-cold gaze watching the brocade-dressed young master. Although her body was attacked by his spirit strength, on the surface, she appeared as if nothing had happened. She was still unruffled and composed, as if unaffected. A startled expression flashed across the brocade-dressed young master's face. He never imagined that this loathsome girl also had a little real ability. However, it was because of this that his interest in Su Luo started to increase. However, just at this time, a black-clothed middle-aged man suddenly appeared out of nowhere. His unbending gaze faintly swept a glance at the brocade-dressed young master. He raised his hand slightly, and the large formidable pressure emitted by the brocade-dressed young master immediately dissipated into nothingness. The cold and oppressive atmosphere returned to its original state. When the brocade-dressed young master saw the black-clothed middle-aged man, immediately, his pupils shrunk. A trace of reverence appeared on his face. The raw materials marketplace absolutely does not allow forced buying or selling. The black-clothed middle-aged man looked at Su Luo. His expression was undisturbed as he said that sentence. Afterwards, he turned his head to look at the young master dressed in brocade. His expression was rather displeased. Even more so, we don't allow the use of martial strength for intimidation. Before his words faded, a thin layer of cold sweat appeared on the brocade-dressed young master's forehead. As if at this moment, he was in the middle of enduring a high pressure that was difficult to describe. Both of his legs seemed as if someone had severely kicked it. They unable to bear the pressure, and were about to kneel on the ground. However, he tenaciously gritted his teeth to bear with it. He strongly endured, not allowing himself to kneel. He gnashed his teeth until the grinding sounds burst out loud. The people who heard it felt their teeth ache. Yes, the brocade-dressed young master's entire body trembled, as if he could not bear it anymore. He bit his teeth tightly and squeezed out one word. Quickly get lost now. The black-clothed middle-aged man frowned, as if he was very annoyed. However, in the time he lifted his hand, that powerful pressure concentrated on the brocade-dressed young master's body that wouldn't let him resist dissipated. The young master dressed in brocade looked like a person that had been dragged out of a pool. He was drenched in cold sweat from head to toe. Even more sweat was dripping down from his face. Yes, the brocade-dressed young master weakly answered. In a flash, he brought his group of hateful servants with him and ran away with his tail between his legs without looking back. Just like this, without turning back his head, he ran away. Everyone saw that this brocade-dressed young master was made to leave with just a few words. Some people were stunned, some were confused, but even more were full of disbelief. Correct, it absolutely was hard to believe. Why? The matter was very simple. Based on their many years of experience, strolling through this raw materials marketplace, that brocade-dressed young master had done evil deeds many times before in this raw materials marketplace. However, there was never a black-clothed person who would personally appear to put a stop to him. Even more improbably, to directly force him to run away. Because everybody was aware of that brocade-dressed young master's identity. That kind of aristocratic family was not something anyone would dare to offend. However, today, the black-clothed man appeared so fast. Moreover, he showed no quarter moving against the brocade-dressed young master. In that case, was it a coincidence? Or was it deliberate? If it was a coincidence, then forget it. If it was deliberate, everyone's gaze without exception concentrated on Su Luo's body. If it was done deliberately, then this young lady's identity was perhaps very influential. Momentarily, everyone looked at Su Luo in a daze. The mood in their hearts were constantly changing with complicated or blank expressions. Now, taking advantage of everyone being in a daze, a person added fuel to his feet, wanting to run away. Su Luo loudly yelled out, "Ho-san, stand still for this lady. You want to run now? It's too late." Chapter 215. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 3. Ho-san was the one who had previously made a bet with Su Luo. If he lost, he would have to eat the entire piece of source stone. Now he had actually seen that Su Luo could force the brocade-dressed young master to run away, and he immediately thought to escape. However, who let Su Luo's eyes be so sharp? "Ha ha, young lady, what are you saying?" "I, Ho-san, mean what I say. Who wants to flee?" Seeing that his path was blocked in all directions by the crowd, Ho-san could only grudgingly stand in place. He turned his head and smiled flatteringly towards Su Luo. Su Luo had both hands crossed over her chest, and her foot stepped on the piece of source stone that was part of the bet. She cast sidelong glances at Ho-san with a faint smile. "You mean what you said? Then it couldn't be better. Come, quickly eat this source stone." Really going to have to gnaw a source stone? His teeth weren't that strong, okay? Ho-san's face looked like he was suffering. He repeatedly bowed with hands in front, begging for forgiveness from Su Luo. "Young lady, your venerable person has great magnanimity. Please be charitable and spare this lowly person. This lowly person really can't gnaw this source stone to pieces. If this lowly person can gnaw on it, then why would I need tools to peel this stone?" Su Luo also really didn't plan on letting him gnaw on it. After all, the surface cover of the source stone was not something human teeth could make a scratch on. What was more, according to the little divine dragon's probe, the stuff inside this source stone was not bad. She would hate for Ho-san, this kind of lowly person, to take it away for nothing. However, asking her to let Ho-san get away in this manner? Grievances must be settled. For Su Luo, whose merciful thoughts were smaller than a pinhole, how could she possibly agree? One could only see her unhurriedly lifting up her foot and weighing that lump of source stone in her hand. She playfully tossed it up and down. The corner of her mouth had a mocking smile. "Then you say what should be done?" Ho-san heard a possible softening intention in Su Luo's words, and immediately, he was all smiles. His smile was fawning and trying to get on her good side. "Young lady, your luck is so good, you should not waste it. How about I give this source stone to you to settle our bet, okay? Like this to settle the bet so easily? Do you think it's possible?" Wanting to satisfy Su Luo, who was like a lion with her mouth wide open, it was not an easy thing to do. Then what does the young lady feel should be done? You say it. If I could do it and it's not something that would violate my conscience and ethics, Ho-san promised to do it. Ho-san patted his chest with a righteous and virtuous appearance. A young lady that could even force the brocade-dressed young master to flee. How could she be simple? If she insisted on forcing him to swallow the stone, what could he possibly do? It's not something that would violate your conscience and ethics. Su Luo faintly smiled. This lump of source stone weighs about 10 kilograms. Let's do this. I will pick another 9 stones from your pile of stones, altogether making up 10 pieces of source stones. Then this debt will call it settled, okay? To give away 10 pieces of source stones for free? These materials were worth 5 to 6 gold coins. However, in order to honor his bet, Ho-san had no other alternative. He could only agree. Okay, just do it according to what the young lady said. Su Luo's face looked indifferent, but her heart became cheerful. Poor Ho-san. How would he know that she had the little divine dragon as a super cheating tool present? Su Luo had already checked out all of the source stones in Ho-san's booth. Letting her choose, she would naturally pick all the good ones and take it away. Those that were left over were all garbage. Hey, didn't you, Ho-san, mock Lu Qi for not cutting out a single crystal stone for a year? Then, I'll let you have a taste of not being able to cut out a single crystal stone in a year. Let's see if afterwards, you still dare to indiscriminately blacken people's name. Okay, then just these 10 pieces. It seemed as if Su Luo carelessly pointed at another 9 pieces of stone. However, as a matter of fact, Su Luo had already picked out all of the source stones that contained crystal stones. Chapter 216. Playing tricks on the pretty boy 4. But truthfully speaking, Ho-san's stone's quality could be regarded as pretty good. In the thousands of pieces of raw material, unexpectedly, she found 2 crystal stones. As for the remaining 8 pieces, Su Luo wanted to use them to play dumb. The reason why she selected this waste material was because she wanted to keep a hand up her sleeve. When Ho-san saw Su Luo had actually gone to select among the higher quality materials, his heart was full of regret, and he almost ran over. He continuously bowed with hands in front as he begged for mercy. Young lady, please be lenient. Please by all means show mercy. That center position, which originally only had 5 to 6 pieces, she had rashly picked out 4 pieces. It indeed made his heart bleed almost to death. Su Luo's eyes narrowed and she carelessly said, Okay, then just this many. Come. Since you bragged about your good luck, Ho-san, cut open all of them. Su Luo boldly used her foot to kick at that pile of source stones. If she had to carry everything home to cut, she wouldn't have that much time or manpower. Moreover, she still had other things she needed to do. Ho-san's heart hurt sorely. It wrenched in agony until he was half dead and had lost most of his life energy. This was because Su Luo had given him an age-old difficult problem. She wanted to make him personally cut these source stones. If he cut out a crystal stone, how could he not go mad from jealousy? If he was unable to cut one out, then wouldn't he be bringing black luck to his store? As a result, whether he could cut one out or not, his heart would not be happy with either result. Ho-san really couldn't understand. This miss seemed to be merely 14 to 15 years old. How could her brain be so weird and cunning? Was she trying to plot against him? To conspire against him openly and above board? Ho-san was frustrated and depressed for quite a while. However, the surrounding heckling crowd was really noisy and bustling with excitement. Added to that was Su Luo's mysterious identity. Ho-san had no choice but to lift up his spirit and cut the source stones for Su Luo. Nevertheless, he should look forward to cutting out a crystal stone. This way, the source stones in this store could all be sold for a good price. Ho-san finally came around to the idea. He continuously prayed that he could cut out a crystal stone. His hand lifted and the knife cut down. The first cut was like cutting a watermelon starting down from the middle. The exposed 2 halves were all a gray dusty color. Not a trace of a crystal stone's color could be seen. Ho-san was unwilling to believe it. Slice after slice, he cut everything into silk-like bands. However, as before, no trace of crystal stone could be found. Ho-san, little fellow, your luck is not as good as Lu Qi's. Look here. Today he just now cut a source stone and was able to cut out a crystal stone. What's the matter with you? That's right, that's right. Ho-san, you should work a little harder. If you cut out a crystal stone, the source stones in your shop, old Zhao, will buy them all. The surrounding people all liked to join in on the fun, and heckled on for no reason. They unceasingly gave Ho-san more pressure. Ho-san's heart was getting angry, but he had no way to let it out. He picked up the second piece and started to cut. However, despite the fact that he had cut it into fine powder, still there was nothing. The third piece, the fourth piece. Still no trace of a crystal stone. Ho-san started to get anxious. Drop by drop, cold sweat appeared on his face. He took a furtive glance at Su Luo, and only saw that she was the same as before. An appearance of being unmoved by any winds that blew. She casually stood, with a careless gaze that seemed indifferent. The fact was, cutting these source stones had no negative impact on her funds. If he cut one out, she would make a profit. If he didn't cut one out, then his own reputation would suffer a loss. Whatever happened, she was unlikely to lose out in the end. It was no wonder that she had this appearance of being secure. Once Ho-san thought to this point, he again felt a burst of suffocating anger. His heart was full of endless regret. This young miss appeared to be pure and dim. Who knew she would be this cunning? Afterwards, even if he gained 10,000 more times the courage, he wouldn't dare to oppose this little witch. Ho-san's heart suffered from pent-up frustrations, but his hands didn't stop. The hand lifted and the knife lowered the fifth piece. Still nothing. The sixth piece. Ho-san started to waver. Chapter 217. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 5. It shouldn't be this way. In theory, this young lady's choice was from a pretty good raw material. How could there not be a single crystal stone? This was really too unbelievable. Quickly cut it. What are you doing still staring distractedly about? Someone anxiously said. If it has it, then it is there. If it doesn't have it, then it's not there. Even if you hesitate for a short period of time, a crystal stone not being inside it would unexpectedly change to there being one. So don't delay and cut down with your knife. This person's meaning was clearly that the earlier his demise, the earlier his rebirth. Ho-san's heart was still very tangled and confused. However, under the pressure and force of thousands of eyes, he continued to cut the stones. Nothing, cutting 6 lumps of pretty good raw materials in succession, and still can't find a single crystal stone. Right, if we were to buy these from Ho-san's shop, then we would have lost really badly. Fortunately, this old man was just looking around, and didn't randomly make a purchase. That's right. It seems like this batch of Ho-san's raw materials aren't very good. The numerous sounds of discussion spread to Ho-san's ears. It made him so angry that he almost started to shout out loud. The person here who was restraining the most aggravation was him. Ho-san, okay? You guys don't spend money, and are only here to watch the fun. But this uncle spent money to invite you all to watch the fun, and still has to listen to your derision. Who did this uncle provoke and stir up for things end up like this? Naturally, Ho-san only dared to say these words in his heart. If you really wanted him to say it out loud, as if he was courageous enough? Now Su Luo wrinkled her brows, as if she was unhappy. She waved her sleeves and casually said, forget it, forget it. Your luck is really bad. Such good source stones in your hands, and couldn't even cut out a single crystal stone. Forget it, don't cut it. I don't want to cut more. Ho-san immediately became worried. With a sobbing voice he said, Great aunt, it's not my hands that have bad luck. It's this source stone that just don't have any crystal stones. What can I do? He was also innocent, okay? Su Luo mockingly and sarcastically raised her eyebrows, and unhurriedly said, Oh, then your meaning is that your batch of source stones quality is not very good. Ho-san was immediately at a loss for words. How could this young lady's words be so sharp? Finished, once again he had been successfully attacked. This young lady was indeed attacking with a spear while defending with a shield. No matter what was said, the one out of luck was him, Ho-san. But miss, you must let this lowly one finish cutting the rest of the stones, all right? Now, Ho-san was not afraid if Su Luo took advantage of him. He only seeked to cut out a crystal stone, trying to retrieve some confidence for the customers of his shop. Su Luo's thin eyebrows moved slightly. Cut all of them? If it was all cut to nothing by you? Forget it, forget it. Seeing that you are not living well, just cut another one then. Su Luo used her toes to kick a source stone that rolled into his arms. Okay, don't gripe so much, just cut this one. If it has it, it's there. If it doesn't have it, then it's not there. Holding this good quality source stone, Hosan's heart became delighted. Good. Then it's agreed. This source stone had all kinds of spots, bands and colored patches. Also, the lines were clear at first glance. And you could tell it had a high probability of having a crystal stone. This piece was clearly selected by that girl from among the highest grade raw materials pile. Hosan right now became a little more cautious and careful. His gaze was serious and cautious, as he looked at this piece of source stone for a while. Then he fixed the stone onto the cutting machine. He measured it once in all directions. Finally he decided to follow along the band, to start cutting from the upper left. Normally, following the direction of the band, was the direction of the crystal stone. All the surrounding people were also infected by Hosan's caution and seriousness. Everyone held their breath in rapt attention, both eyes full of lively spirit. All of their expectations were placed on this piece of source stone. The knife descended, and the dust flew upwards. After waving aside the dust particles, almost everyone's gaze was concentrated on that evenly cut opening. Chapter 218. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 6. Alas, it was followed by a period of sounds expressing great pity. The cut was smooth, but what made people disappointed was that even though the cut followed the band, this source stone unexpectedly, like before, still had nothing. Both sections were grayish-white. Seeing it made a person's heart feel suffocated. Don't have. How could it be like this? Hosan was beside himself as he looked at the two similar-sized halves of the source stone. His complexion gradually became pale. He never expected that even after cutting 7 pieces in succession, all of them were grayish-white stones without any worth. I don't believe this. Hosan, with a deep breath, swept down the cutting tool in his hand and diced those 2 halves of source stone into dust. However, inside, not even a fingernail-sized crystal stone could be seen. Seeing Hosan's hand once again reach for the source stones on the ground, Su Luo spoke to intercept. Hold it. The crisp yell woke up the drunken Hosan. He had a stupid and blank expression as he looked at Su Luo. Su Luo's tone was not good as she said, "You already wasted 7 of my source stones, and now you still want to continue cutting? Don't even think about it." A mouthful of blood was blocking his throat. How could it be called her source stones? These were all shipped over from far away in the southwest using his gold coins, okay? Su Luo let out a cold humph sound. She unhurriedly put the 3 fist-sized source stones in her embroidered bag, afterwards hanging it around her waist. Finally, she swept Hosan with a slighting glance. "The feng shui in your shop is not good. This miss will bring it hope and slowly cut it." Don't joke. These 3 pieces all had genuine crystal stones in them. How could Su Luo let Hosan cut them? How could she set aside an opportunity for him to make a comeback? Therefore, like the old saying went, I would rather offend a person of noble character than one with a nasty character. Especially Su Luo, this kind of small-minded woman whose philosophy was hatred, would certainly seek vengeance. Hosan looked on helplessly at that small embroidered bag at her waist as Su Luo strutted away. He wanted to call out to stop her, but discovered that his words had all been exhausted. The more Hosan thought, the more regretful he was. He had truly slapped himself in the face this time. The crowd watching this entertainment on the side immediately dispersed and left. Hosan became anxiously worried. If he allowed these people to leave, then today's news that he had cut 7 source stones in succession, without finding a single crystal stone would spread. This would be extremely unfavorable to his shop's reputation. Hey, you guys don't go. Hosan continuously tried to stop these people. I still haven't finished cutting it all. You guys have a look, maybe a piece of crystal stone could be cut out. What, Hosan, young fellow, you still dare to cut more? The old man being pulled unceasingly shook his head and advised him. Forget it. Don't let your emotions affect your decisions. Your luck today is truly bad. No way, He couldn't let them go like this. Ho-san loudly shouted. Halt! I, Ho-san, will cut 10 source stones today, and see if there is a crystal stone inside. Hearing that there was entertainment to see, the sound of everyone's footsteps stopped. Their gaze once again returned to Ho-san's body. Ho-san summoned his courage. He personally ran over to the shop and picked out a source stone. He slapped at the source stone and heroically said, "Betting on source stone, betting on source stone. Since we are gambling on source stones, then by all means bet on it. Now let's lay down the bet. Buying the bet that the source stone has a crystal stone. The payout is 1 to 100. The bet that there is no source stone, payout is 1 to 1. Buy quickly, place your bets, and no thanks necessary." Ho-san lost those 3 source stones to Su Luo. His wishful thinking returned, and suddenly thought of this method to gamble. However, the pitiful him was completely unaware, because of the existence of the little divine dragon. The only 3 pieces of source stones within his shop that had crystal stones had all been fished out by Su Luo. The remaining were all waste materials. If he knew, he definitely would not choose this way to gamble, because this was absolutely losing with no possible chance to win. Only it was a pity, he didn't know. As a result, as the saying went, you truly couldn't offend a younger sister one. Especially an intelligent younger sister that loved to hold grudges. 1. I translated it as younger sister, but the characters said younger sister on paper. Probably a play on words that might mean beautiful paper, based on how it sounds in Chinese. I am guessing it could be a slang to describe someone shallow or petty. Chapter 219. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 7. Su Luo had already left earlier. Naturally, she did not know about Ho-san's self-styled genius idea that he came up with later to recover his losses. If she had known, she would very likely be laughing until her body rocked back and forth, because she could entirely predict that after all the bets were placed, and the source stone was cut, Ho-san's face would be like a colorful palette. This raw materials marketplace was huge. This, however, was Su Luo's first time here. As she was unfamiliar with the layout, she could only leave it to her luck. Only that in Su Luo's point of view and from her experience, every profession would have their own circle and regulations, such as gambling stones. If she didn't have a referral from people in the profession, she wouldn't know where the few hidden shop of experts were located. Even though she had the little divine dragon, who could sense crystal stones in her space, if she wasn't even allowed to enter their shop, then it was still useless. Just when Su Luo was worrying while walking around, suddenly, 2 little boys ran towards her, trying to catch up with her. However, Su Luo was on guard and turned sideways to avoid them. Those 2 little boys hadn't expected Su Luo to react in that way. They had a somewhat stunned expression, but very quickly, their expression was restored. They were play fighting and being noisy, and continued to run until they were far away. The corner of Su Luo's mouth rose into a shallow smile. Even if she had ended up in ancient times, she was still as proud as before of her accurate sixth sense. Just now, she felt that the 2 little boys that were noisily play fighting were fishy, so she turned sideways to avoid them. Soon after, their reaction wholeheartedly confirmed her suspicion. Those 2 little boys were deliberately pretending to fight playfully in order to get nearer to her side to steal her purse. As expected, she would have to be careful everywhere she went in this raw materials marketplace. If she didn't pay close attention, then she wouldn't be able to protect her purse. Even such young kids knew to form groups to steal. Su Luo just smiled and proceeded to walk forward. Only, she didn't take more than a few steps before her figure halted. This was because a boy wearing old-fashioned clothes, which was clean and neatly washed, stood in front of her. With a deadly earnest tone, he started to speak to her. "Most noble miss, do you need a guide? Don't just look at me being young. My home is only 10 meters away behind this marketplace. From when I was little, I grew up in this gambling stones marketplace. I'm familiar with everything within here. Whatever information you need, I could tell you everything. In addition, I could also take you to the hidden shops." The little boy's clothes were old-fashioned, and his proper pants had been worn until it was mostly tearing apart. The cloth-made shoes were worn out, with a hole exposing his big toe. Seeing Su Luo's gaze sweep his pair of shabby shoes, he was somewhat anxious, and shifted his foot to the back. However, no matter how he shifted, under the shortened pants, he couldn't conceal that big toe of his. Su Luo's gaze once again landed on the little boy's face. Looking at his age, this child was definitely no older than 10 years of age. Who would have thought that this poor and embarrassed little boy could have such a pink face that looked like it was carved from jade? Simply owing to experiencing a life of suffering and hardship, this little face was stretched taut into a dead serious expression. It had a little grown-up, mature appearance. However, this was indeed similar to when a drowsy person was handed a pillow. It was just in time to suit her needs. Just a moment ago, Su Luo had been pondering how to get a person familiar with this market to take her to the hidden shops in the inner part of the marketplace. The reason was that frequently, only those shops would have stored good quality raw materials for a long time. Those other little small shops were unable to enter her eyes and be deemed as worthwhile. Right now, it just so happened that the little boy had delivered himself to her door. However, Su Luo was also not someone who would welcome just anyone. She indifferently took a glance at that little boy and lightly asked, "Why is it that you didn't join those two? Looking at their appearance, they live a much better life than you." Su Luo was referring to those two little boy thieves who had tried to bump into her before. Chapter 220. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy, 8. The little boy in front of her was shaking his head in disagreement. Once you enter the door to thievery that's deeper than the ocean, from then on, your conscience becomes a stranger. Mother always taught me that regardless of when, and regardless of landing in whatever circumstances, I must adhere to the basic conscience of my heart. I must be upright and frank. I cannot do work that is against my own conscience. Seeing the little boy's deadly earnest preaching appearance, Su Luo suddenly felt that this was very funny. She had an impulsively strong desire to pinch his pink and tender cheeks. She continued to ask another sentence. "Oh, you really have never stolen anything? I don't believe it." I only stole one thing, and it was a loaf of bread. That was when my little sister was so hungry, she was gnawing on the corner of the table. I had no other choice." The rim of the little boy's eyes were a little red. He was also afraid that Su Luo would spurn him and cause him to lose this job. He anxiously explained. "However, the next day, I earned some money and paid back the money for the stolen bread. Really, I am telling the truth." Su Luo saw him become so anxious that his face was flushed and couldn't help but laugh. "Why are you so anxious? It's not like I am that person who was selling bread. Okay, tell me your price. This miss want to see if you are suitable." Su Luo could tell that this little boy's genes were excellent. Maybe the cause was his family suffered a reversal of fortunes. Even though his living situation had become poor, but his character was still as good and honest as before. Just as he himself had said, he adhered to the ethical principles. Someone who could adhere to the basic principles during poverty, let alone a child, this point was exceptionally hard to come by. The little boy didn't know that Su Luo's assessment of him was pretty good. He was afraid of being spurned by the employer, so with a red little face he anxiously said, "I am very inexpensive. I only charge 10 copper coins per day." Seeing that Su Luo didn't reply, thinking that she believed it to be too expensive, he anxiously changed his answer. 5 copper coins. 5 copper coins is enough. Mother's medical prescription needs at least 4 copper coins, and I need to buy some thin wheat for little sister to eat. She is young and her throat is small. If she drinks coarse grains she would throw it up. His pair of large, dark, and clear eyes unblinkingly looked at Su Luo. Inside of them, there was pleading, longing, and also hope. It was very complicated and heavy. Just looking at it made a person's heart feel sad. Su Luo's heart inevitably felt some sentiments. At such a young age, he needed to take care of a sick mother and a frail younger sister. That he could still adhere to the basic principles was really not easy. Su Luo patted his little head. "Okay, 10 copper coins then. It's settled at 10 copper coins. If today older sister reaps some profit, then I will give you more as an additional reward." Su Luo's hand reached into her sleeves, and originally thought to pay him 5 copper coins as down payment, to boost his enthusiasm. However, she suddenly recalled that compared to this little bit of money, she really was too rich. Because the only currency in her hands were gold coins. She didn't even have a single copper coin. Never mind, let's discuss it when the time comes. If he passed her test, she could award him not merely 10 copper coins or 10 gold coins, but rather the boundless prospects for this little boy's future for the rest of his life. Even though Su Luo hadn't given him a down payment, the little boy was already very thankful for her kindness. The little boy was extremely happy. He was bowing and also giving thanks at the same time. Many thanks, miss. Thanks a lot, miss. You are a good person. A very good person. Because very few customers would hire a child like him. The customers either wanted tender and beautiful women with great bone structure, or an agent with numerous connections. He was already satisfied with just being hired. Su Luo saw that he didn't mind it, so she also didn't mention it. Oh, that's right, what are you called? She wanted to observe this child more carefully, to see if he was worthy of being cultivated by her. Su Xiaoyuan, miss, can call me Su Boy, Xiaoyuan, or Dumpling. Whichever one you want to use is okay. Su Xiaoyuan was smiling until both his brows and eyes curved upwards, appearing very excited. Chapter 221. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 9. Your last name is also Su? Maybe 500 years ago, we were from the same family. Su Luo smiled while patting his shoulder. Okay, go to the front and lead the way. Today the time is still early. We should properly roam around this raw materials marketplace. Oh, that's right. Did you also see my and that brocade-dressed young master's conflict just a moment ago? While walking, it seemed Su Luo suddenly thought of something, and she carelessly asked this to Su Xiaoyuan. Yes, indeed I did see it just now, and also recognized that brocade-dressed young master. Does Miss want to ask about his identity? Xiaoyuan asked seriously. Sure enough, this child was not stupid. With regards to his customers, he filtered them carefully through diligent observation. He did not just recklessly rush up to them to ask. Okay, tell me his information. Su Luo softy said. He couldn't make out the client's mood, so with a firm expression Xiaoyuan replied. Speaking of that brocade-dressed young master, his background is indeed very powerful. I heard his last name is Lu. He is the second son of Prime Minister Lu, called Lu Qingfeng. Miss, in the future, you should carefully avoid him a little. Reportedly, this person is very petty, and will certainly avenge any hatred. From his perspective, a son of the venerable Prime Minister's family was the highest and most noble existence. It was an existence that he could only look up at from afar. Su Luo's eyebrows rose slightly. Lu Qingfeng? Prime Minister Lu's family's second young master? Prime Minister Lu, these 3 words, why were they so familiar? Suddenly, a light bulb went on in Su Luo's head. Finally the answer appeared. Lu Ruohua. Wasn't Lu Ruohua the 3rd miss from Prime Minister Lu's residence? Then wouldn't Lu Qingfeng be her older brother? Sure enough, people marry because they share the same traits. 2 of the Prime Minister Lu's family's younger generation had become her enemy. It looked like her and the Lu residents were unable to get along. However, speaking of Lu Ruohua, Su Luo suddenly recalled a matter related to her. That day when she returned to her own remote courtyard, Su Wan had brought their cheap father and hurriedly arrived. At that time, Su Wan was certain that she hadn't returned yet. Then, who was it that told Su Wan the news that she still hadn't returned? Moreover, how could she confidently say that Su Luo and His Highness Prince Jin went to the Sunset Mountain Range? And also say that she and the Jade Lakes Fairy had a conflict? Who was this person? Simply someone who called out with such passion. Lu Ruohua. Besides her, there simply was no one else. Then. The matter of when Su Wan invited the black-clothed hitman to rape her in the middle of the night. To what extent did Lu Ruohua participate in it? It looked like when she returned, she really needed to properly admire the moon and have a heart-to-heart talk with Su Wan, who was locked in the clear-thinking courtyard. Having thought up to here, the corner of Su Luo's mouth lifted slightly. Speaking of which, Su Xiaoyuan was indeed the local boss of this area. After 7 to 8 turns into very small streets, He brought Su Luo to an old street with simple, unadorned old-fashioned houses. He pointed to an old-fashioned residence with a courtyard and said to Su Luo, "Miss, this is the home of Elder Chen. Elder Chen's family's hidden shop is among the most abundant in supply of raw materials, and with the most variety of highest grades material. Naturally, the price is also very high." Su Luo's gaze swept the surroundings once. This place appeared somewhat remote and desolate. It didn't look lived in, and very few people passed by here. The area had a quiet and deserted appearance. However, this did give off a little of the atmosphere of a hidden shop. Just like in Su Luo's previous world, the most authentic delicious food was not at the noisiest city center, but was often located at unremarkable places. A tourist with a fleeting glance in passing, and without a person guiding them, often wouldn't be able to find these places. Su Xiaoyuan's little knuckles went knock, knock, knock on the door, in a pattern of 3 long and 2 short knocks. Not long after, the door opened with a creaking sound. At the doorway, a very old face, like the skin of an orange peel, appeared. His entire face was full of wrinkles, with turbid eyes and grizzled hair. He appeared to be an elderly man of 80 or 90 years old. Chapter 222. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 10. "Uncle Chen, I brought over a customer for you." Su Xiaoyuan reverently bowed with hands held in front of him. He had a deferential expression. His eyes were clear and pure. Old Chen's sharp eyes were like the point of a knife launched toward Su Luo. In just that straightforward way, staring at Su Luo. Su Luo hardly took it lying down, and returned the stare. Her back was straight, and her gaze was chilly without a single ripple. Her imposing manner was not in the least going to back down. Both of them stared at each other face to face for a long time, neither side's willing to give way. Finally, it was still Old Chen who lost the staring contest first. Only, Old Chen neither nodded nor shook his head. He turned around, and with hands behind his back, went in. He softly spit out merely 3 words. "Open the door." With this she had passed the test. Su Luo, with a somewhat speechless expression, looked at Su Xiaoyuan. Up until now, Su Xiaoyuan had been holding his breath, and he was finally able to let it out. He patted his stomach and took a breath, but his smile was radiant. "Let's go." Uncle Chen agreed to let us go in. This place would actually drive customers away? Su Luo felt that this was somewhat unfathomable. Xiaoyuan proudly raised his little head and said to Su Luo, "Of course, Uncle Chen's temper is eccentric. Normally he doesn't like to see strangers. That's why he is not fond of being bothered by strangers. People who can come here normally are people who had done business with him for a few times, and the collaboration was a pleasant one. People like Miss, who is coming here for the first time, and is welcome to go inside, are very few, very few." "Isn't it because I relied on your fortune?" Su Luo smilingly replied. "It's not. I also brought clients here a few times before, but without exception, they were all driven away by Uncle Chen." Xiaoyuan's expression was serious as he continued. "There are 3 types of people that could enter this courtyard. One type is the business people that had pleasant collaborations with him. Another type is people Uncle Chen say, that brought them together through fate. And the last kind is, what is it?" Su Luo curiously asked. "Foolish spendthrift." Xiaoyuan covered his mouth as he smilingly responded. "Foolish spendthrift?" Su Luo had a hard-to-accept expression. "Then you tell me, do I belong to the second type or the third type?" Xiaoyuan was all smiles as he glanced at Su Luo. "Older sister, naturally, you are the type which fate brought you together. As for the foolish spendthrift, take him for an example." Su Xiaoyuan's finger pointed towards a brocade-dressed pretty boy youngster. However, when he saw that guy's face as he turned around, the smile at the corner of his mouth immediately stiffened. It transformed into a sobbing tone. "Miss, I really didn't do this on purpose. I really didn't know he would be here." The person that scared Xiaoyuan stiff was none other than the person who had wanted to forcefully buy Su Luo's red-colored crystal stone from before. The brocade-dressed young master, who was driven away from the raw materials marketplace by the supervising guards. He was also Lu Ruohua's older brother Lu Qingfeng. Seeing this face, A short saying flashed through Su Luo's heart. This truly was enemies on the same narrow road. Such a large raw materials marketplace, so many hidden shops, and against all expectations, she once again ran into him. Now this Lu Qingfeng young master was right in the middle of cutting a stone, piece by piece. Su Xiaoyuan saw those stones and couldn't help stared wide-eyed with a somewhat incredulous expression. Oh heavens! These source stones are all of the highest grade. Every piece was more than 50 gold. And he actually cut it like cutting a vegetable, cutting randomly and negligently. If he was to break the crystal stone from this cutting method, then it would be a pity. A broken crystal stone from cutting would have its spirit force dispersed outwards. If it was not refined for cultivation, and following a period of time and postponement, the spirit force would become less and less, until it all fade away. Therefore, the price of a broken piece of crystal stone generally wouldn't sell for very high. Su Luo's hands encircled her arm. She contentedly laid against the mahogany pillar. She indifferently watched as Lu Qingfeng cut the stones. Now as for Lu Qingfeng, he still hadn't discovered Su Luo's presence. His entire attention was concentrated on the source stone in his hand. Seeing piece after piece of source stone, he was full of hope. But after cutting it open, it had thoroughly disappointed him, and an angry expression flashed across Lu Qingfeng's face. Chapter 223. Playing tricks on the pretty boy 11. Lu Qingfeng's luck didn't seem to be very good. He had cut 9 source stones in a row, without even mentioning higher-grade crystal stones. Even red-colored crystal stones hadn't appeared. Now placed in front of Lu Qingfeng was an oval-shaped source stone about the size of a soccer ball. Just looking at its exterior, it should perform very well. There were spots and snake-like stripes, clearly labeling it as having great potential to produce a crystal stone. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been picked by Lu Qingfeng. Only, didn't know if the inside was as promised. After all, regarding the human race, even if they were the most formidable experts, they still weren't able to penetrate through the outer layer of the source stone to determine what's inside. This was the last piece of source stone he had purchased. Lu Qingfeng was hesitantly holding the source stone, uncertain where he should start cutting. He measured the stone up, down, left and right. He was reluctant to start cutting. Today he had spent 1,000 gold coins, and had carefully selected these 10 lumps of source stones. However, after cutting the preceding 9 stones, they had all contained nothing but waste materials. If this last piece still didn't succeed, then his 10,000 gold coins had only bought the sound of water floating away. 1,000 gold coins, that was equal to 10,000 silver coins. Even though he, Lu Qingfeng, was the second son from the most noble prime minister's family, this amount of money was also not something he could easily throw around. Now Lu Qingfeng was undoubtedly nervous and apprehensive. He laid down the stone-cutting knife and from the side, took out a sharpening knife. He carefully and gently started from the left, slowly following along the direction of the snake-like banding, polishing into the stone. After polishing the stone for about 10 minutes, Lu Qingfeng clearly became somewhat impatient. He directly changed back to the stone-cutting knife, and without gesturing, he immediately cut down in the middle, starting to slice towards the sides. A crack sound echoed. The source stone split down the middle into 2 pieces. The cut was neat, even and smooth as if it was tofu. It was a pity that the inside was all grayish-white. Not even the shadow of a crystal stone could be seen. Bang! Lu Qingfeng angrily threw down the stone-cutting knife. His eyes just happened to catch sight of Su Luo, who was directly facing him, with a smile that was not quite a smile. Enemies meeting on the same narrow road. When enemies came face to face, their eyes blazed with hatred. Even more so when meeting under these kind of circumstances. It's you. Lu Qingfeng recognized Su Luo with one glance. A pair of darkened eyes now were covered with even more haze. They glared at Su Luo with a very vicious and cold expression. The corner of Su Luo's mouth lifted into an unsympathetic smile. Her eyebrows rose slightly and she carelessly said, "Yes, it's this lady. What are you going to do about it?" Lu Qingfeng hadn't had a chance to speak before the dog-like lackey at his side had already rushed forward. He arrogantly said to Su Luo, Do you know the status of our young master? You actually dare to use this kind of attitude to speak to our family's young master? Such a minor servant. Su Luo didn't feel like wasting words on him, and directly ignored him. She merely shook her head, and looked down upon Lu Qingfeng. Second young master Lu's luck tsk. Shut up. Just now, Lu Qingfeng's mood was not so good. And to also be confronted with Su Luo's taunting banter. A ball of fire combusted into a raging flame in his heart. This is the Chun residence, not your Lu residence. Put away your son of Prime Minister's behavior. Unless you're not afraid of losing face. Su Luo leisurely said while sitting on a deck chair, under a wisteria tree on the side. Her gaze indifferently swept a glance at Lu Qingfeng. The expression in her eyes was full of disregard. Lu residence, the Prime Minister's son. As it turned out, she actually knew he was Prime Minister Lu's family's second young master. Then, why would she dare to act this way towards him? What was her background? Where did she get the confidence to dare disregard himself in this way? Lu Qingfeng's eyes narrowed slightly. A thread of stunned surprise flashed through his eyes. Right now, Su Luo was stroking the little divine dragon who was sleeping charmingly and naively in her lap. The little divine dragon wasn't even a little bit conscious of his nobleness as a golden divine dragon. He was sprawled on his back, laying down in Su Luo's lap. His little belly swelled and released continuously, while a thread of saliva hung at the corner of his mouth. Evidently, he was in a deep sleep. Chapter 224. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 12. However, taking into consideration of his instinct for security, his little paws had tightly grabbed onto Su Luo's lapel, afraid of being discarded. Your little puppy actually seems pretty good. Lu Qingfeng discarded that useless source stone. He was not going to cut anymore. With both hands behind his back, he leisurely walked over to Su Luo's side. He arrogantly looked down while sizing up the little divine dragon in her lap. Tell me, how much is this little thing? This lord wants to buy it. Wanted to buy the little divine dragon? The corner of Su Luo's mouth slowly split at the seams into an arc. She shot a pondering gaze at Lu Qingfeng. Was the little divine dragon something a person who wanted to buy could buy? I'm afraid that even if the Prime Minister worked for 100 lifetimes as a Prime Minister, he still wouldn't be able to collect enough money to buy a single hair on the little divine dragon. Su Luo lightly said, not selling. Loathsome girl. Our family's young master wanting to buy your puppy is considered him favoring you. How dare you fail to appreciate his kindness? Didn't know from where that dog-like lackey came out once again. He arrogantly pointed at Su Luo's nose and cursed. All of a sudden white-colored rays of light appeared in front of their eyes. Then a bloody mist sprayed out. That dog-like lackey saw his own right hand neatly severed at the wrist. At the moment, he still hadn't reacted to it. As soon as his reaction caught up, the pain immediately made him screech out loud like a slaughtered pig. His pain made him run around the courtyard haphazardly. You Lu Qingfeng didn't expect that this loathsome girl would be this vicious. Before she even said anything, she would strike, and had already attacked. He loudly roared with anger, saying, how can a woman like you be so malicious? Too vile. What? Young Master Lu also wants this mist to cut off his repulsive tongue? Su Luo unhurriedly gestured towards the dagger covered in dripping blood. She shot Lu Qingfeng an indifferent glance. This woman, Lu Qingfeng's heart trembled a little, but his face had an expression of enduring this while he angrily said, since you know who I am, then very good. You dared to injure someone from the Lu family. Then wait for the Lu family's retaliation. People from the Lu family will absolutely not be bullied like this in vain. Su Luo looked down at him and smiled. You keep saying using the Lu family name to retaliate. Lu Qingfeng, are you still a little kid who would go home to ask the older generation for help? She actually dared to look down on him. Lu Qingfeng was almost choked half to death by Su Luo's last half of her sentence. He furiously said, good, very good, you are very good. If you have the guts, then report your real name. When Su Luo came to the raw materials marketplace, she was afraid of things that would emerge that she couldn't gain control of. Therefore, she intentionally made over herself to look only 30% like her real appearance. It was assured that even if Sushi stood in front of her, she may not necessarily recognize her. She currently came here concealing her real appearance. Why would she report her real name? Was this Lu Qingfeng's brain burned until he was confused? Just at this moment suddenly, the little divine dragon in Su Luo's lap woke up. He opened his misty eyes. Those sleepy eyes drowsily looked at Su Luo. His right little paw was rubbing at his eye socket. That face had an innocent and bewildered expression, which was really too adorable for people to ignore. Su Luo, when faced with his expression, her heart immediately went soft. Such an adorable little thing. Really didn't want him to grow up. Lu Qingfeng saw that Su Luo's attention was now attracted to the puppy, completely ignoring the prime minister's son in front of her. Suddenly, he flew into a rage over this humiliation. His hand grabbed towards the little divine dragon and coldly said, "Since it's like this, then this puppy will be considered your offer of apology. Now he belongs to me." You actually dared to snatch away the little divine dragon. Tired of living? Before Su Luo could take action, one could only see the hand reaching towards the little divine dragon suddenly blow out a bloody mist. Afterwards were the desperate cries of an utterly discomfited Lu Qingfeng. "Aha!" Chapter 225. Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 13. How sharp was the little divine dragon's teeth? At that time, the arrow from the Jade Lake's fairy, which had contained the strength of heaven and earth, was also gnawed to bits by him, as if chewing on a sugar cane. To say nothing of Lu Qingfeng's human body made of flesh and blood. However, the little divine dragon was still in a drowsy state. Therefore his actions were much gentler than when awake. So he only took a tiny bite of Lu Qingfeng's flesh. Lu Qingfeng saw that the back of his hand was missing a mouthful of flesh, with blood violently spurting out. Immediately he furiously yelled, "Loathsome girl! Today you are toast! Don't you even think about walking out of this door." The sounds of activity here were too loud, arousing the attention of old Chun inside the room. Now his eyebrows wrinkled with his body straight and tall, and both hands behind his back. Step by step, he strolled out into the courtyard. A trace of annoyance and impatience flashed across his eyes. "Stop making so much noise. If both of you keep this up, then get out." If old Chun was a proprietor of a regular hidden store, then no problem, but unfortunately he wasn't. Everybody knew that behind the scenes, old Chun, in this raw materials marketplace, was linked to countless connections. Hence, in old Chun's residence, nobody dared to be impudent. If you were to offend old Chun and be put on the blacklist, then afterwards, you wouldn't even be allowed to go through the entrance of this raw materials marketplace. So, even though Lu Qingfeng was infuriated until he was screaming, he still wouldn't dare to take action in front of old Chun. Only his treacherous gaze was full of viciousness, sinisterly staring at Su Luo. Thus, this confirmed how strong his wrath was in his heart. Su Luo only faintly smiled as if unconcerned about his ire. Just at this time, suddenly, the little divine dragon in Su Luo's lap started to move about. He jumped out of Su Luo's lap like a graceful leopard, and onto the ground. One could see him run quickly towards where Lu Qingfeng was cutting source stones. Finally, he stopped at the last source stone Lu Qingfeng had cut before. That lump of oval-shaped source stone had already been split into two pieces by Lu Qingfeng. It was divided into two equal-sized half-spheres, and the little divine dragon jumped on top of the right half of that source stone while barking a woo-a-woo. Su Luo was delighted. What was the little divine dragon? He was a mobile crystal stone detector. A crystal stone that could make him excited. How could it be inferior? However, just when Su Luo was in the midst of being excited, Lu Qingfeng had also recovered his thoughts. He took large strides to walk towards that piece of source stone, and was about to brush the little divine dragon away. However, the little divine dragon merely bared his fangs at him. Su Luo's footsteps stopped. She worriedly held up her forehead. Not of the human race, really not human-like. Even if you are from the noble divine dragon race, this IQ really made people worry about him. This source stone was originally Lu Qingfeng's. Now, with the little divine dragon's fervent performance, anybody would know that there was a problem here. Although Lu Qingfeng didn't know that the little divine dragon could detect crystal stones, he could tell that this was a good omen. Anybody would look at the cut source stone more closely to get to the bottom of it. As expected, now Lu Qingfeng laughed evilly again and again. He summoned his subordinates. Drive this puppy away. Afterwards, place this half of the source stone onto the cutting device. This lord will properly cut it, and check to see if there is, or isn't a crystal stone inside. Su Luo somewhat regretfully sighed. It looked like this time she had made the clothes for other people, only letting Lu Qingfeng snatch away this small advantage for free. Originally, he had already discarded it as something he didn't want. Alas, this feeling of lost was damn stifling. However, just at this time, something happened that startled the heavens and reversed the situation. One could only see the little divine dragon hugging that half of source stone tightly. He was unwilling to let go. Seeing everyone come towards him and about to encircle him, he immediately became anxious. He was so anxious that he frantically circled around on top of that half of the source stone. Finally, the him that was quick-witted in an emergency. Chapter 226, Playing Tricks on the Pretty Boy 14. He stuck his little butt up high, his thin right hind leg lifted up, and aimed at that half of source stone. With a twinkle sound, he let out a stream of yellow pee. The corner of Su Luo's mouth pursed. Not being able to bear anymore, she turned her head away. As his master, how could she not feel embarrassed? Okay. Lu Qingfeng's mouth pumped a few times, and he had a constipated expression on his face. His brows knotted in disgust. At this time, even old Chen's sharp-as-a-knife expression also pursed slightly. His ancient, well-like deep pupils which were normally placid now had a thread of laughter. Because this little guy really was too. It just made people speechless. Other families' little animals would protect their food. However, nobody had ever heard of one that tried to snatch a source stone. It really was an offbeat puppy that was full of mystical characteristics. Following a period of silence, Lu Qingfeng was the first to react. He glared at Su Luo sinisterly. The corner of his mouth perked up into an evil sneer. That half of source stone was sullied by your pet. Now, you tell me what should be done. Hearing his tone, it was as if the fault lied with her. However, things ending up this way was not so bad. Nobody discovered her gaze wandering over with a greedy light that had disappeared faster than a wink. Su Luo frowned. She didn't have a worried expression, and threw a quick glare at the little divine dragon. Again, she frowned and said to Lu Qingfeng, "Isn't it just some urine on the surface of the source stone? Just cut it away and it would be fine." Since Lu Qingfeng had already decided to place the blame on her, how could he be made to let go so easily? He was already prepared to extort a lot of money from her, and earn back all the money he had lost today from buying source stones. One could only see that Lu Qingfeng's expression was not agreeable, as he coldly smiled. "You tell me to cut it away, so then I'll just cut it away? Then what do you want? Want me to ask a person to clean it before returning it to you?" Su Luo's expression appeared to be angry in an instant. She fought back with her reply. "Humph. The surface can be washed clean. But what about luck? Maybe inside it was a green crystal stone worth 5,000 kilograms of gold. Since your obnoxious puppy peed on it, all of the luck disappeared. This debt, how do you want to settle it?" Lu Qingfeng arrogantly raised his chin and said forcefully, Your type of person. How can you be so capricious and mule-headed? If there was one inside it, then it has one. If it doesn't have it, then it really doesn't have it. This crystal stone was formed several thousands of years ago. How could it be made to disappear by my puppy's pee? Who are you trying to kid? If you want to extort from me, you should at least make up a good reason. It seemed as if Su Luo had not been lightly angered. Her face had turned red, and she was stamping her feet in fury. Yet the more Su Luo acted this way, the more pleased Lu Qingfeng became. One could only see him laughing evilly repeatedly, pointing at the little divine dragon who was still howling a woo at half of the source stone. "Isn't it your family's puppy?" Su Luo nodded her head. Lu Qingfeng seized this opportunity to pressure her even more. "Did he or did he not just pee?" Su Luo once again nodded her head. Lu Qingfeng said with relish. Then these gold coins, are you going to compensate for them or not? Su Luo frowned, shook her head and said, that half piece of source stone was already something you discarded and didn't want. How could you ask me for compensation? It's too unreasonable. Humph, who said this lord doesn't want that half piece of source stone? This lord spent money to buy source stones. Why wouldn't I want it? You think this lord is wealthy enough to burn money? The more Lu Qingfeng said, the more he gave off a victorious, imposing manner. Step by step he pressured Su Luo. Are you going to pay or not? If you are not going to pay, then this lord will pluck the hair off your puppy one strand at a time, and make barbecue dog meat steamed buns out of him. Su Luo seemed to have been greatly infuriated, but she had no alternative. Finally she clenched her teeth and said, in the end, what do you want to do? 1,000 gold coins. With a flip sound, Lu Qingfeng opened his folding fan and fanned himself in a satisfied manner. He conceitedly raised his chin and shot a glance at Su Luo from the corner of his eyes. 1,000 gold coins. The money to settle the debt for the goods delivered. Not taking credit for payment. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.